X-Men, the animated series explored. Today, we are going to take a nostalgic trip to one of the most iconic 90s series that started it all and opened the door for the mutants to stream in. X-Men, the animated series, was Marvel's solid attempt to make an animated series about the mutants. Produced by Marvel and Saban Entertainment, it covered various X-Men storylines, including Days of Future Past, Age of Apocalypse, and the Phoenix Saga. The series ran for 5 series from 1992 to 1997. There has also been an official revival called X-Men 97, which aired in 2024 on Disney+. And before Season 2 arrives, we think that it's a good time for a rundown through the original.
And this.
Season 1, Night of the Sentinels, Part 1. What are mutants, and why are the Mutant Control Agency coming after Jubilee? We will get an answer, but for now, Jubilee runs away from home after overhearing her foster parents get worried. A rather gigantic trouble comes knocking as the robot called Sentinel breaks through Jubilee's window only to find her missing. The Sentinel tracks her to a mall, where Jubilee gets ousted for being a mutant. She runs into Storm and Rogue. But when the Sentinel captures Jubilee, Storm and Rogue come to her rescue. Jubilee runs away, but encounters Gambit, who further helps her escape. The Sentinel manages to follow Jubilee outside of the mall when she comes across Cyclops, who finally finishes off the robot and takes an unconscious Jubilee to Xavier's school for gifted children. The battle at the mall is taken from when Jubilee first appeared in the Uncanny X-Men series, issue 244. The Sentinels were again introduced in X-Men Volume 1, issue 14. When Jubilee wakes up in the recovery room, she blasts off the machines and leaves the room. She is bewildered by the different mutants, including Beast, Morph, Professor Charles Xavier, and Jean. A packed Jubilee enters the danger room in the midst of a simulation fight between Gambit and Wolverine. She misconstrues the situation and saves Gambit from Logan, only for Storm to take her outside and explain everything. Storm explains that nobody knows who became a mutant, but their powers begin to reveal themselves when they're as old as Jubilee. The X-Men find out the Mutant Control Agency is leaking data on all the mutants, and that's why the Sentinels are targeting Jubilee. Professor X appoints a team to follow up on the matter and leaves Cyclops in charge. However, when Jubilee goes missing, Wolverine defies orders and leaves to track her down. Jubilee runs away to warn her foster parents, but Henry Gyrich has reached them before. Jubilee gets captured by the Sentinels before she makes it home. As for the rest of the X-Men, they arrive outside the Mutant Control Agency headquarters, and Wolverine joins them after losing track of Jubilee. The episode ends with the Beast, Morph, Wolverine and Storm entering headquarters, where soldiers await them behind the doors. Night of the Sentinels, Part 2. Wolverine gets a whiff of the guns and the soldiers, so instead of opening the door, Storm blasts through it, fighting the soldiers. The group immediately finds the data storage room and deletes all the data whilst fending off the soldiers. Meanwhile, Cyclops, Gambit and Rogue do the same as they destroy the tanks and fight the soldiers arriving in the headquarters. All this while, Henry Gyrich interrogates Jubilee about the X-Men but gets no answers. Trask doesn't approve of Gyrich using his Sentinels so early when Gyrich gets informed about the attack at the HQ. However, a greater disaster strikes when the group inside the building tries to make their exit. A host of Sentinels ambushes them, and Morph sacrifices himself to save Wolverine. Jean feels his death, while the other X-Men break down. Everyone except Beast and Morph returns, and Wolverine gets into an argument with Cyclops, blaming him for leaving Beast and Morph behind. Jean stops them and tells them it's no one's fault, while Wolverine slices up Cyclops' car and leaves on his own. Apparently, Morph was killed by the Sentinels, while Beast was caught. Cyclops made the call and asked everyone to head to the Blackbird jet, but Wolverine refused. Rogue zapped him and stopped Wolverine from following. Back in the present, Wolverine promises to avenge Morph, whilst Beast gets questioned by Gyrich. But Beast grieves for Morph and refuses to answer. The opening sequence of the series features each main X-Men character using their powers and their stylized codenames appearing. The X-Men instrumental theme accompanies the intro. In fact, the same style is used for X-Men 97 in 2024. The President of the United States, a woman in this case, informs the public about the outrageous attack by the renegade mutants on the Mutant Control Agency headquarters. However, she questions Garac about his true intentions, since a bunch of mutants were ready to sacrifice themselves. The President orders Garac to shut down the mutant registration program. Meanwhile, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, meets Wolverine at a bar, but the other patrons take off his goggles. They return it when Cyclops' optic blast destroys a pool table. Cyclops asks Wolverine to find the Sentinel home base while he visits Jubilee's foster parents. Although Jubilee's foster dad informs Garac, he confesses to Cyclops when his wife informs him that Jubilee is kidnapped by the Sentinels. As Cyclops leaves the house, a Sentinel attacks him, but he only slices its arm off. The Sentinel returns to Trask's base for repairs, allowing the X-Men to track it down. The X-Men destroy all the Sentinels and rescue Jubilee, but Trask and Garac escape. Later, Jubilee moves to the Xavier Institute after bidding farewell to her foster parents.
Better that we die on our feet than live on our knees.
Enter Magneto. Beast is in prison and the guards mock him. They are suddenly called to duty when someone attacks the facility. It's Magneto, and he tries to break Beast out of the prison, but Beast refuses to leave, and the guards continue to shoot at them. As Magneto takes them down, Xavier and Jubilee watch the entire ordeal from the Institute. Xavier recalls his time with Magnus, aka Magneto, while working in a psychiatric hospital. It was when Xavier could walk. He states that Magnus was from a small country that was invaded during the war, and that he lost his family. When a woman in the hospital was attacked by soldiers, Xavier and Magnus had to use their power to save her. Xavier stopped Magnus from killing the soldier, but it pushed Magnus onto becoming Magneto and gathering followers. Although Xavier stopped his run, he is apparently back and stronger. Later, at trial, Hank McCoy, aka Beast, tries to make a case for the mutants and explain their standing, but he is denied bail. Cyclops stops Wolverine from attacking the guards, but suddenly Saber-tooth appears from nowhere to rescue Beast. The guards attack Saber-tooth, but despite Wolverine's protests, Cyclops saves him and brings him to the Institute. Earlier, Saber-tooth made a cameo appearance on the news in the first episode. When Wolverine slices off Saber-tooth's life support, the Professor and the rest stop him. They are interrupted when an alert reveals that Magneto has attacked a missile base. Wolverine, Cyclops, and Storm head off to confront Magneto, who has launched the nuclear missiles, and the army has to evacuate. This episode is based on the X-Men Volume 1, Issue 1, where the X-Men meet Magneto for the first time. Magneto assumes the mutants have come to join him, declaring war on the common people, but X-Men break his bubble. Magneto subdues the three and leaves, but the X-Men recover, and Storm takes it upon herself to blow up the launch warheads. However, Xavier uses Cerebro to guide her into defusing them as they hit the ocean. The X-Men return to the Institute, while Magneto rues Xavier's decision.
Second best.
Deadly reunions. Professor Xavier probes Saber-tooth's mind and helps him fight his demons. However, Saber-tooth blocks Xavier and breaks the connection. When Cyclops, Wolverine and Storm inform Xavier about the encounter at the military base, he claims that Magneto believes mutants are superior to humans. Xavier takes the team to the mission room to restrain Saber-tooth. Wolverine immediately demands to attack, but Saber-tooth claims to be an old friend of Wolverine, who retorts that Saber-tooth wasted some of Wolverine's friends. However, there are bigger things to worry about as Magneto attacks the Metro Chemical Factory, starting a fire and spreading panic. The X-Men are deployed to handle the situation, while Jubilee is appointed to watch Saber-tooth. When a group of X-Men arrive at the factory, Magneto is disappointed as he wanted Xavier to answer his call. He fights the X-Men, subjecting Cyclops to toxic fumes, while a brick wall collapses on Storm, triggering her claustrophobia. Rogue rushes to help, but the wall comes down on Rogue and Storm. Meanwhile, Xavier finally enters the factory to directly confront the Master of Magnetism. While the duo get into a verbal spat, Rogue recovers Storm from under the rubble and tries to wake up Scott. As Rogue performs CPR on Cyclops, his powers transfer to her, and Rogue is unable to manage it. On a different note, the show contains too many characters, and so budget, casting and deadlines were some of the biggest challenges the creator and Fox, which ran the series in its Fox Kids programming block. Xavier refuses to join Magneto, and Magneto knocks Xavier off his hovering chair. As Magneto proceeds to end him, Xavier probes into Magneto's mind, forcing him to remember his traumatic separation from his parent. Magneto is forced to flee while Xavier brings back his chair with telekinesis and helps Rogue to escape with Storm. Meanwhile, Senator Kelly announces his presidential candidacy. As Jubilee watches the news, Saber-tooth threatens to kill Kelly. He pretends to be hurt by the restraints, making Jubilee open it. As she helps, Saber-tooth tries to hurt her, but Wolverine appears and fights Saber-tooth. Professor X and the team return only to find Wolverine and Saber-tooth fighting. Professor misunderstands Wolverine, but when Saber-tooth tries to attack him, Jubilee uses her power on Saber-tooth, pushing him out. Saber-tooth escapes, and Xavier apologizes for his misjudgment. While Xavier realizes his path is challenging, Magneto promises himself to gather a mutant army.
Keep your head, lady.
Captive Hearts. Storm's claustrophobia comes to the forefront during a training session in the Danger Room. On the other hand, instead of recuperating from Saber-tooth's attack, Wolverine is back to exercising. As Jean goes to meet him, there is a momentary tension as Wolverine confesses his feeling. Jean leaves hurriedly and goes out on a date with Cyclops, when they witness Leech, a small mutant boy, stealing fruit. As Leech gets chased by humans, he escapes in the subway, where Morlocks attack the humans. Jean and Cyclops try to save the human subway, but are also knocked out by Anna Lee, a Morlock with hypnotic powers. Callisto orders the Morlocks to bring Cyclops and Jean to their underground base. When Cyclops wakes up, Callisto realizes that she wants Cyclops as her consort, and her heir through him. Who can blame Callisto for having a crush? Leech further reveals he's taken away Cyclops' power. The plot is based on Uncanny X-Men issues 169 to 170, but some of the characters involved are changed. Cyclops rejects Callisto and demands to see Jean, but Callisto has chained her up. However, Jean breaks free, and while fighting the Morlocks, she sends a message to Professor X. Jean gets recaptured, but the X-Men arrive in the tunnel to rescue them. Oh, and by the way, this episode gave us some iconic Wolverine memes. Storm leads the team of X-Men to the tunnel despite her fear of closed places. The X-Men find Jean, but Anna Lee makes her believe that she's Anna Lee's daughter. Wolverine rescues Jean, but Callisto reveals Cyclops is dead. Callisto has definitely underestimated Wolverine's animalistic instinct, which helps him reveal that it's actually a shape-shifting Morlock pretending to be Cyclops' dead body. The X-Men battle it out with the Morlocks, and Wolverine finds Cyclops while chasing Callisto. Plague gives a fever to Gambit, and Storm asks Rogue to take him back to the mansion. When Wolverine speaks aloud his feelings regarding Cyclops and Jean, Callisto overhears it and asks Anna Lee to use it against them. Thanks to Jean, Anna Lee fails in making Wolverine kill Cyclops. Ultimately, Storm challenges Callisto in a duel, and although it's a lot more ruthless in the comics, they fight with lightsabers in the series. Storm wins and assumes leadership of the Morlock. When the Morlocks refuse to go with her until the humans above accept them, Storm leaves Callisto in charge. The X-Men return to the mansion, and the Professor praises Storm's leadership, while Jean and Cyclops find that Wolverine is gone.
You were never a match for me, Wolverine!
Cold vengeance. Cyclops is upset that Wolverine has irresponsibly left, and Jean realizes it's because of her. The man in question enjoys skiing in northern Canada, but Saber-tooth disrupts his peace. The fight leads to Wolverine falling off a glacier and floating on a block of ice. However, he gets rescued by a bunch of native fishermen. Back at the Institute, Cyclops gets into another argument with Gambit, who insists on investigating the island of Genosha. Apparently, it's a mutant-friendly island. Professor Xavier asks the X-Men to investigate, and Cyclops lets Storm to lead Gambit and Jubilee to Genosha. Now back in the polar regions, the natives, called the Inuit, nurse back Wolverine to health. Wolverine realizes they don't know about the mutants and stays back. He quickly becomes a favourite as he helps the tribe with fishing and carrying the load as well as joining the merriment. However, this makes a man called Kiuek extremely jealous. As Saber-tooth finds Kiuek, he reveals he hates Wolverine. Now, you must have noticed that the series features serialized episodes, but originally Fox thought that kids wouldn't be able to keep up with the serialized content. They also thought that kids wouldn't like the love triangle, but it didn't matter. Storm and Jubilee take on more regular clothes, while Gambit remains in his usual updo as they arrive in Genosha. However, the hotel clerk detects that they are mutants and secretly informs someone. Back with the Inuit, Kiuek takes Wolverine away from a fishing trip, and Wolverine realizes something is amiss. Wolverine forces Kiuek to return only to find the camp is burned down by Saber-tooth. Kiuek realizes the mistake and confesses, but Saber-tooth has tied the villagers to an ice bridge with explosives. Wolverine fights Saber-tooth and throws him down the mountain before rescuing the villagers with Kiuek's help. Puyata claims that they will now move to the city, while in Genosha the 3 X-Men are attacked and captured by Sentinels. Slave Island. The captured X-Men find themselves in a detention centre along with some other mutants. They are used as slaves to build a dam, and collars have been put on their neck that stop them from using their powers. The moment the collars are deactivated, Storm tries to attack, but she is quickly incapacitated, and Bolivar Trask arrives, revealing it's his project. Trask orders the Sentinel to kill Storm, but Gambit reveals Storm's power with the intent to save her. The Sentinel locks up Storm in a box, while other mutants are forced to work. A power failure at the detention centre at night enables Jubilee to unlock her cell. She implores Gambit and the other prisoners to attack the guards the next day, but none seem interested. Back at the mansion, Cyclops and Jean fail to connect with Storm at Genosha, while Wolverine returns. They decide to head to Genosha and check up on the matter. Meanwhile, Xavier calls an old friend called Moira McTaggart, who works at the Muir Island Mutant Research Centre in Scotland. The next morning, Jubilee finds that Gambit was taken away the previous night. Jubilee and the rest try out her breakfast plan, but it fails miserably as Gambit has betrayed them. Jubilee is put in another box beside Storm. Meanwhile, Trask reveals a Sentinel building robot called Master Mold to Garac. Cameron Hodge, the development advisor to the government of Genosha, and the leader who is a former colonel and now ruler of Genosha. The dam is used to power Master Mold. Gambit is brought to these people, and he offers to take them to the X-Men. However, it turns out to be a ruse, as Gambit escapes the guards while he is taken away. He is further aided by Cable, who makes his official debut outside the comic books. Cable's origin was not confirmed when the series was released. Cable is here to catch the leader, but hands Gambit a key to unlock his collar. Cameron Hodge explains that Cable is an American and was a mercenary in the leader's army, but left after knowing about the leader's non-democratic activity. Garac offers to kill Cable, but Cable attacks their office. Cable also corners their leader, but a smaller Sentinel helps the leader escape. Gambit also rescues Jubilee and Storm, and together they fight the Sentinels. Jubilee manages to free the other mutant slaves, who leave to take over Genosha, while Storm brings down the dam. This destroys the factory, but as Storm faints, Rogue catches her. Cable also catches up to Leader and Hodge, but they are washed away by the flood. Master Mold also tries to escape, but fails. The X-Men return to the Institute, only to find it demolished.
Keen to get his attention. What's this?
The unstoppable Juggernaut. The X-Men investigate the ruins of their demolished home, and Cyclops comes across the Professor's message. Apparently, he left the mansion on a mission before the mansion was destroyed. Wolverine further discovers giant footprints and leaves to track them. An annoyed Cyclops sends Storm, Rogue, and Jubilee to find Wolverine. The girls go their separate ways as they reach the city. At a construction site, Jubilee spots a Russian dude called Colossus, who turns into steel and helps the manager bring down a building. However, the rest of the workers protest against the mutant worker for stealing their work. They even try and run him over, but Colossus handles himself. Wolverine and Jubilee attack Colossus, but he is not ready to fight, and Wolverine smells him to realize that he is not the culprit in destroying the Institute. As Rogue and Storm call about a similar attack at the First National Bank, Jubilee and Wolverine join them. They notice Colossus being unfairly arrested for the demolition and robbery. Wolverine further gets the same whiff at the bank as the Institute. This prompts Storm and Rogue to break out Colossus from jail, where they meet Beast, still waiting for the court to rule in his favour. Beast refuses to leave, while Colossus agrees, and the three escape prison. It may come as a surprise that initial plans of the series did not involve Professor Xavier, Beast, and Jean Grey. The writers fought for it, as they are the most crucial to the plot. Meanwhile, Jubilee and Wolverine track down the culprit, and Wolverine recognizes the criminal as Juggernaut, the half-brother of Charles Xavier. The police fail to stop him, but Wolverine and Jubilee confront him. Juggernaut claims to have destroyed the mansion and banks to get Charles's attention. By this time, the rest of the X-Men arrive, but individually fail to stop Colossus. The plans to take off the helmet, and Colossus joins the X-Men in the task. Rogue tries to zap Juggernaut, but absorbs his rage, power, and resentment for his brother, who got all the parental affection. While Jean probes Juggernaut's mind, Storm and Colossus help Rogue. Juggernaut wakes up with no memory of who he is or what he was doing. As he leaves, the X-Men worry when Jean's power will wear off. Later, Colossus helps the X-Men rebuild the mansion, but decides to leave to look for his sister, while Wolverine and Jubilee share a moment of affection for their home.
That's kind of hard to believe, coming from you.
The Cure. The episode begins with Warrington Worthington III spending time with his girlfriend, Gisela, as she worries about the mad scientist. Warren, aka Angel, assures her that he has sent the man called Gottfried Adler to Scotland for research. When Cable comes looking for Adler, Warren fights him and exposes himself as a mutant to Gisela. She mistakenly shoots him and he flies away. At Muir Island, Moira McTaggart takes Professor Xavier to meet the very same Dr. Adler, but Adler refuses to meet. And as Xavier tries to probe his mind, he sees Mystique. However, Xavier is pushed away and stopped by another mutant. Meanwhile, the rest of the X-Men continue rebuilding the mansion, and Wolverine's orders are kind of getting on everyone's nerves. They earn a respite when Xavier calls and informs them about Dr. Adler and his so-called mutant cure. Rogue, frustrated with her inability to touch another human, accepts this offer and sneaks out at night. Gambit tries to follow her, but she flies away, clearly missing out on the advantages she has as a mutant. Rogue arrives at Muir Island and enters a pub, where Pyro assumes she is Mystique. Rogue takes out both Pyro and Avalanche, who has been waiting there under Mystique's order. She visits Adler for the cure, and Adler asks her to come back. After Rogue leaves, Adler turns into Mystique and consults her master, Apocalypse, who has cooked up the cure scam to recruit slaves to do his bidding. Apocalypse is dressed in purple in the series instead of dark blue. While Rogue remembers her first boyfriend, Cody Robbins, Pyro runs into Cable. Cable shoots down Pyro, but Avalanche rescues him. The duo decides to kidnap Adler and impress Mystique. This backfires, and Rogue tries to stop them. Meanwhile, Xavier and Moira investigate the kidnapping scene, while Cyclops and Jean arrive looking for Rogue. Elsewhere, Rogue fights Pyro and Avalanche, whilst Cable tries to kill Adler. It is revealed that Adler made the mutant collars from Slave Island. Mystique reveals herself to Cable and states that the real Adler is dead, but as the X-Jet arrives, she reverts to Adler and the X-Men attack Cable. He falls over the cliff and vanishes, while Rogue saves Jean from falling. Rogue repairs Adler's equipment and changes her mind about the cure, but no worries, Angel has signed for the treatment. As Mystique informs him, Apocalypse reveals he has to destroy the world as it is.
You cannot oppose me.
Come the Apocalypse. Mystique reveals herself just before Angel goes through his treatment, while Apocalypse turns up and promises to reward Mystique for her loyalty. At the local pub, the X-Men and Xavier witness mutants gathering to seek treatment. Warren suddenly shows up and claims to have been cured. He rounds up mutants for the cure, and Cyclops tries to dissuade them, but Rogue argues on their behalf. However, it's actually Mystique who has shown up as Warren. The real Warren Worthington III has turned into Archangel, and one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen. Archangel represents death, while Apocalypse transforms 3 other mutants to represent famine, pestilence, and war. Sometime later, the X-Men come across a news report covering the World Peace Conference in Paris, which is attacked by Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen. Xavier sends his own X-Men to handle the situation, while he sends Rogue and Jubilee to apprehend Adler. The 4 horsemen are the same, and have the same look as they debuted in X-Factor issue 15. The 4 horsemen spread chaos as famine removes food, war turns weapons against the armies, and death destroys a dam. Meanwhile, Rogue confronts Adler, who reveals her true colours, and also Apocalypse's plan. Mystique also tries to kill Rogue, but Rogue escapes, and so does Mystique. The other X-Men defeat Pestilence, but the other horseman saves her from capture. Following Mystique's information, Rogue flies to Stonehenge, where she confronts Apocalypse. As Apocalypse tries to kill Rogue, the horsemen arrive with the news of the interfering X-Men. The X-Men also arrive at Apocalypse's base, having followed the horsemen. The battle goes in the X-Men's favour, while Rogue takes Archangel's power. However, Apocalypse transformed his underground base below Stonehenge into a jet and escapes while the other 3 horsemen also fly away. Rogue realises she has absorbed only the villainous part of Archangel, while he warns her and flies away in another direction.
5 seconds.
Days of Future Past, Part 1. In a distant dystopian future, the mutants are hunted by sentinels and a mutant tracker called Bishop. An older Wolverine attacks Bishop and tries to stop him but gets captured. Bishop takes Wolverine and the other mutants to the Mutant Termination Center, but his luck runs out as the Sentinels inform Bishop that he has reached the quota and is no longer needed. As Bishop and Wolverine carry the other two mutants into the center, Wolverine notices the gravestones of his X-Men friends. Wolverine, Bishop, and the other mutants revolt, taking down the Sentinels that were escorting them. However, a Super Sentinel called Nimrod appears, and a mutant asks Wolverine to leave and complete the mission. Wolverine and Bishop arrive at the Rebel hideout, where they meet Forge. Bishop and Forge were not in the original comic storyline of the Days of Future Past. Although the story stays almost the same as the Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 issue 141, the character of Kitty Pryde was replaced by Bishop. Moreover, Colossus and Storm also survived in the future. Wolverine decides to use the temporal transceiver and time travel to the 90s to stop an assassination that would lead to the Sentinels taking over in future. However, with Nimrod attacking the shelter, Bishop insists on going. However, time travel messes with his mind and Bishop forgets the identity of the assassin. Meanwhile, Rogue and Gambit visit Beast in jail, but Beast still refuses to break out of his cell. As the transceiver shows Bishop the mansion, and he deduces that the X-Men are the assassins, he hijacks a bus and rides off to the mansion. The X-Men fight Bishop and Wolverine almost kills him, but Xavier stops him and probes Bishop's mind. Xavier finds snippets of the future from Bishop's mind, but no one can believe him. The transceiver further warns Bishop that someone is travelling through the portal, and it turns out to be Nimrod. The X-Men battle it out with Nimrod, but it easily repairs and Bishop has to forcibly send it back to the future. However, Bishop still doesn't remember the assassin, and later when Rogue and Gambit arrives, Bishop recognizes Gambit as the assassin and fires at him. Days of Future Past, Part 2. Rogue and the other X-Men save Gambit from Bishop, and soon Sentinels started hunting down mutants and sending them to detention camps. This escalated as Sentinels also started hunting down humans who defied them and took over the White House. However, Bishop can't remember who got assassinated, and Xavier sends a team to DC to stop the assassination. Professor Xavier also asks Bishop and Gambit to stay back, and Wolverine volunteers to babysit them. This does not go down well, as whilst playing cards, Gambit manages to cause an explosion and escape. He takes a jet to fly to Washington to prove he is not guilty. Needless to say, Bishop and Wolverine follow. In Washington DC, Xavier, Cyclops, and Jean attend the hearing, where Xavier gets questioned about his school. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants attacks and disrupts the meeting, but the X-Men defeat them. Wolverine and Bishop also join the rest of the X-Men as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants flee. Meanwhile, their leader, Mystique, takes the form of Gambit as she attempts to assassinate Senator Robert Kelly and frame the X-Men for it. The real Gambit arrives to stop her, but Bishop also enters and attempts to shoot both. Rogue stops Bishop and destroys the temporal transceiver, sending him back to the future. Interestingly, in every comic and cartoon, Rogue joins the X-Men with super strength and the ability to fly. She doesn't have these abilities in the movies. In other versions, she absorbed the powers from Miss Marvel. While real Gambit lies unconscious, Mystique reveals herself as Rogue's foster mother to her so that Rogue lets her escape. Senator Kelly and his secretary tell the other X-Men about the assassination attempt, and they find Gambit unconscious. Meanwhile, Raven Darkholme, aka Mystique, and Rogue fly to a nearby pond, and Rogue tries to plead with her. However, Raven claims Apocalypse gave her a purpose in life. Back in future, Bishop finds nothing has changed, and finds that Wolverine has died. As Forge notes, Bishop has to return until things are fixed. Back in the 90s, Xavier finds out that Magneto has kidnapped Senator Kelly.
Next time I try to save your life.
The final decision. Professor Xavier sends his team to find Magneto before he does anything to Senator Kelly. Meanwhile, Magneto takes Senator Kelly to a ship and tries to kill him, only for the Sentinels to stop him. The Sentinels leave Magneto fatally injured and take away Kelly. The X-Men arrive at the spot and find Magneto. They take him to the mansion for recovery. However, Senator Kelly doesn't seem to catch a break, as he and Bolivar Trusk find out that Master Mold now has a mind of its own. The super robot takes over, as it plans to take down all humans and mutants. Master Mold declares his plan to replace all the world's leaders' brains with computers, including Kelly's. The plot is adapted from X-Men issues 14 to 16. The X-Men locate Henry Garac from Gambit's memories and corner him at the Lincoln Memorial. Trask calls Garac, and as the phone falls from his hand, the X-Men learn of Master Mold's plan. They learn about the Sentinels' base from Garac and head back to the mansion. Gambit doesn't approve of the plan to save Kelly, while a recovering Magneto tells Xavier that he is lost. However, Professor X, Cyclops, Wolverine, and others still want to make a last attempt at saving humanity and the mutants. Gambit also joins, albeit reluctantly. Magneto secretly praises their heroism as they leave with the Blackbird jet. The X-Men launch an attack on the Sentinel base. Gambit and Wolverine fight a group of Sentinels, while the rest attempts to save Kelly. Magneto also arrives to help Charles. Wolverine tries to single-handedly take down the Sentinels, but Gambit joins him. Storm, Rogue, and Jubilee fight the Sentinels outside, while Cyclops and Jean rescue Kelly. But Cyclops goes back to help Gambit and Wolverine. As all of them escape the underground, the Sentinels retreat to save Master Mold from being blown up. Ultimately, Xavier flies Blackbird filled with explosives to destroy Master Mold. Magneto aids Xavier and helps him parachute down safely. Later, Kelly announces the need to consider the good mutants and the benefits they provide. Beast is released from jail, while Cyclops prepares Jean, but a sinister someone monitors them and laughs with malice. Season 2, Till Death Do Us Part, Part 1. As Jean and Scott get married, Wolverine practices fighting a Sentinel version of Cyclops in the Danger Room. The minister officiating the marriage looks suspicious, but it's a shock when he secretly transforms into Morph. But Morph looks slightly different and has crazy eyes. After the wedding, Jean meets Wolverine before leaving for a honeymoon. However, there's no rest for the rest of the mutants, as the newly elected President Kelly gets attacked by the anti-mutant group Friends of Humanity leader, Graydon Creed. Back in a hotel, Morph goes through opposing emotions as he doesn't want to hurt his friends, but feels that his friends left him to die. Clearly, someone else is controlling Morph's emotions. As Morph goes on a dangerous path, he shapeshifts into Magneto to lure him away to the Antarctic. Meanwhile, the Gambit, Wolverine, and Beast encounter anti-mutant protesters attacking the bar where they were chilling. Creed ensures that footage of Beast carrying weapons and holding a car gets recorded. Later, Morph sneaks into the X mansion to cause more mayhem. Morph was initially created as a temporary character, but his popularity led to his return in the second season, and he also appears in X-Men 97. Jubilee turns on the news, which blames Beast for attacking, and an angry Wolverine leaves. Morph returns up as Wolverine at the mountain, and then pretends to be Rogue. He tricks Gambit into kissing the real Rogue, and as a result, he faints. Morph then turns up as Storm to Jubilee and sends her to Creed's address to take care of an anti-mutant attack. Rogue and Storm soon realise something is amiss. While Morph traps Beast in the Danger Room, Storm and Rogue arrive at the Mutant Counselling Centre and try to stop the anti-mutant mob. After Rogue has done her bit, Storm asks her to leave, but Morph changes into a police captain and orders the Force to attack Storm. As Storm is knocked out, Morph enjoys his revenge, while the puppet master controlling Morph is revealed to be Mr. Sinister.
The odds are getting better and better.
Till Death Do Us Part, Part 2. While Jean and Cyclops are on their way to a secluded island for their honeymoon, Beast still struggles with the amped-up Danger Room. Beast eventually manages to escape, while Morph arrives outside the X mansion. Mr. Sinister reminds him of how his friends abandoned him and leaves to take care of Jean and Cyclops. The couple get attacked by Mr. Sinister's minions, the Nasty Boys. They put the mutant slave collars from Genosha on the couple, and Mr. Sinister takes them to his lair. Meanwhile, Rogue and Beast visit Storm in a hospital, but the doctor misjudges them, and they have to escape. Elsewhere, Creed brings the captured Jubilee to a Friend of Humanity meeting, but Wolverine crashes it to save Jubilee. Beast and Rogue return to the mansion, arguing as Rogue claims that Beast did not come to help them. Remy, aka Gambit, wakes up and blames Rogue for knocking him out. To add fuel, Morph shows up as Professor Xavier and tells them about a neural disruptor that's altering brainwaves. When Wolverine and Jubilee arrive, Wolverine realizes it's not the Professor. Morph lies that Wolverine is affected by the disruptor, but Gambit believes and forces Morph to reveal himself. Morph tries to escape with the Blackbird, but Wolverine tries to stop him. Morph turns into Wolverine, and Jubilee mistakenly shoots the real Wolverine, allowing Morph to escape. Did you know that in 1989, a pilot of a series titled Pride of the X-Men aired? It didn't take off, but it became the basis for the Konami arcade game. Now, coming back to Sinister's cave, Mr. Sinister reveals to Cyclops and Jean that he wants their DNA to create a superior mutant army. Having learned that it was Cyclops who decided to leave Morph, he turns up at Sinister's base and tries to kill him. Sinister stops him and reminds him that it was Sinister who found Morph and cured him, but changed his mind by inserting a device. The X-Men also arrive and fight the Nasty Boys, while Morph tries to fight back Mr. Sinister. However, Sinister is unaffected, although it allows Cyclops to break free and he helps Jean to escape. Cyclops injures Sinister, who escapes with his team. Morph also leaves, while the X-Men decide to return home. Cyclops and Jean consider themselves unmarried, as Morph posed as the priest. In Antarctica, Xavier and Magneto realize they're being led into a trap, as an avalanche crashes down on them.
As you did when I was a child.
You don't have a choice.
Whatever it takes. Whilst playing soccer with his friends, an African boy called Mjnari notices a tear appearing in Mount Kilimanjaro. His friends fail to see it, and the Shadow King escapes from the rift, taking possession of Mjnari's body. Jean uses Cerebro and detects the tear in the astral plane in Africa. Storm realizes it's Mjnari and decides to make a trip back to Africa, so Rogue joins her. Meanwhile, in the Upper Amazon, Wolverine is in pursuit of Morph and finds him working in a local bar. Morph transforms into Jean and escapes. In Africa, Storm witnesses her village burning, and she brings rain to put out the flames. She meets her friend Shani, who informs her that Mjnari caused the incident. Rogue is immediately ready to take down Mjnari, but Storm claims Mjnari is her own. Shani further explains that although Shani gave birth to Mjnari, it was Storm who breathed life into him. Storm rushes up to meet Mjnari and confronts the Shadow King. Storm volunteers to let the Shadow King host her body, so the boy is spared. However, Rogue tries to zap the possessed Storm, and instead the Shadow King knocks her off, and Mjnari catches Rogue. Speaking of Morph, he was originally named Changeling, but there were some legal issues as Teen Titans had a character of the same name. Morph runs into an abandoned mineshaft with Wolverine pursuing him. Morph takes the form of several Wolverine foes like Deadpool, Omega Red, Maverick, and even Saber-tooth to fight and flee. Back in Africa, Storm flies outside the atmosphere to suffocate the Shadow King so that he leaves her body. As Storm falls, Rogue catches her. Mjnari insists he can help, and ignoring Rogue's protests, he lures the Shadow King to the astral plane rift that only he could see. Mjnari also seems to possess super speed, which helps him to enter the portal and escape just in time, thanks to Storm and Rogue, who pull him out. As for Professor X and Magneto, they find themselves in an odd land that Magneto recognizes as the Savage Land. Xavier also notices that he can walk, while both seem to have lost their powers. Two savages fly on raptors and abduct Magneto, but Xavier throws a boomerang at them and they drop Magneto into the river. Xavier jumps in and saves Magneto, but both start to fall from a waterfall.
You're mine, Red.
Forgot about my carbonadium armor.
Red Dawn. At Savage Land, Xavier and Magneto come up on shore but are attacked by a dinosaur. They manage to escape it with the help of Magneto's wit, where he ensures a natural geyser burns up the dinosaur's face. In the Kamutsky Valley of the Soviet Union, the Soviet army attacks cities, villages and towns. They also wake the mercenary Omega Red. The Soviet leaders are further aided by Dark Star, who shares her doubts about using a living weapon, like Omega Red. Meanwhile, Jubilee runs into trouble with the Friends of Humanity. As she fights them, Colossus comes to her help. Colossus seeks help to find and stop Omega Red for destroying his homeland. With every X-Men out of the house, Jubilee leaves a note on the fridge and leaves with Colossus. Jubilee takes a plane to fly themselves to Colossus, or Peter Rasputin's village. Colossus is in shock when he finds the place in ruins. Meanwhile, Omega Red gets rid of the leaders and announces his own agenda. Colossus also finds his sister, Illyana, coming out of the ruins. Peter promises his sister to free his family and friends. Back in the mansion, Wolverine notices Jubilee's letter and leaves immediately in search of his old enemy. Colossus, Jubilee, and Illyana find the detention center, and Colossus goes on the offensive. However, Omega Red catches both Colossus and Jubilee when Wolverine arrives. The fight between Wolverine and Omega Red doesn't really go in Wolverine's favor, and so Colossus lends him a hand. In fact, he escapes with Wolverine on his back. As Colossus tends to Wolverine's wound, he recalls how Omega Red was created by Soviet generals as a counterpoint to Captain America. But when he became too difficult to control, he was placed in a cryogenic suspension. The other X-Men, Storm, Rogue, and Gambit arrive, as Wolverine fills them in. The team is further joined by Darkstar, Colossus, Darkstar, the X-Men, and the common people fight against the Soviet army and Omega Red. However, all of them are defeated by Omega Red. Darkstar finally suggests that Storm frees back Omega Red. Colossus further restrains him as Storm unleashes Snowfall upon him. With Omega Red back on ice, Darkstar overthrows the generals who once made her. The X-Men leave as Colossus wishes to stay back and rebuild his home. But is the terror really over? Repo Man. Wolverine is back in Canada and looking for his friend, Heather, when he's ambushed by Heather's husband, Vindicator, and the Canadian mutant team, Alpha Flight. Alpha Flight wants Wolverine back in their team, but he refuses and fights. As Wolverine hides from them, he overhears them discussing about taking him back to the lab. This brings up some traumatic memories of a man called the Professor who infused Logan's bone with adamantium. However, Logan broke out of the facility and escaped. Back in the present, Wolverine is found and captured by the Alpha Flight. It is revealed that Heather Hudson indeed lured him in. Wolverine feels betrayed and remembers that Heather and her husband James found the feral Logan escaping from the lab. Heather had hit him with tranquilizers and brought him back to their house. She helped him recover from his physical and emotional wounds. The couple took him to the Canadian government's Department H, where the General Chasen gave him his Wolverine suit, and Logan agreed to work for the government as a member of Alpha Flight, Canada's poor counterpart for the Avengers. Back in the present, Chasen declares that they were trying to replicate the Weapon X program and want to learn the secret of the adamantium. Although the episode is based on X-Men issue 121, it was written by Luke Wine, who created Wolverine in Incredible Hulk issue 181. In Savage Land, Charles and Magnus meet a woman named Vertigo, who claims that all mutants in the land were created by Magneto, and that they now have a new master. She tries to attack them, but Magneto and Xavier escape. On the other hand, Heather starts her tests on Wolverine, causing him excruciating pain. Jean has been on the Cerebro, looking for Charles Xavier when she feels Wolverine's pain. She is unable to detect Wolverine's location, while Heather grows tired of causing him pain and tries to convince Chasen to leave him. However, Chasen wants to retrieve the adamantium skeleton from Wolverine. Heather quits, but Chasen and Vindicator force her to work. The rest of the Alpha Flight realize they were duped by Chasen and fight his group of android soldiers. This allows Wolverine to free himself. He almost kills Vindicator, but spares him when Heather pleads. Wolverine refuses to be used as a weapon against the Alpha Flight team and leaves, warning them to never find him again. Externally yours. A danger room practice becomes too dangerous for Cyclops when Gambit is behind the controls. Gambit gets a call about his brother Bobby and becomes distracted. He accidentally increases the danger level to extreme. While Rogue and Jean rush to Cyclops' aid, Gambit leaves for home. A flashback shows the Thieves Guild and Assassins Guild offer tithe to a deity called External every 10 years in exchange for power. When the Thieves Guild once failed to offer the tithe on time, the External eliminated him. 10 years ago, Remy's brother Bobby and Assassins Guild member Belladonna were chosen for the next offering. In the present, Cyclops is in recovery and Jean confesses to feeling Remy's distraught mind. As Gambit arrives in New Orleans Bayou, he gets informed that the Assassin's Guild has kidnapped Bobby. He gets frustrated about the age-old family feud when his friend informs him that the Assassin's Guild wants Remy in exchange for Bobby and the tithe. Gambit enters the Bordeaux mansion and tries to rescue Bobby when Belladonna confronts him. Bella now leads the Assassin's Guild and is revealed that Remy apparently left her at the altar on the day of their wedding. Gambit argues that the feuding group wouldn't let him live a normal life. Bella lets Bobby go and gives him a fake tithe while she forces Gambit to wear the wedding ring, which affects him with crippling pain. And Gambit finds that he cannot use his powers. This episode is not really liked by fans, but it provides a little insight into his mysterious past. It is based on the Gambit 4 issues miniseries, and some character names are changed. Jean, Rogue and Wolverine arrived at the bayou and track him. They encounter the Thieves Guild and learn about Belladonna's plan. Meanwhile, Bella forces Remy to marry her after the offering and reveals that she gave fake tithe to Bobby. The X-Men also appear at the place of offering. While the assassins arrive with Remy, Gambit reveals that Bella gave a fake tithe and the X-Men help Gambit while the assassins and thieves fight. External arrives and attempts to kill Bobby for giving a fake tithe, but Jean shows her truth. And External takes away Bella's power. Gambit rejects Bella once again and leaves with Rogue in his arms. Back in Savage Land, Magneto's mutants continue to attack them, but Charles and Magneto escape them again.
Don't run from these mutant freaks!
Time Fugitives, Part 1. In 3999 AD, Cable fights Apocalypse's forces when a temporal storm appears. A time device tells Cable that time is changing itself due to a certain change in the past, and it is caused by a mutant called Bishop. However, as time gets realigned, Cable and his time will be erased. As the time device shows Cable what happened in 2055 AD, Bishop learns of the plague from Forge, but apparently the X-Men have all perished through time. Forge reveals that the plague virus was genetically engineered, and at first humans were infected, but they lived, and then the mutants started becoming its victims. Inside the mutants, the virus mutated and became deadlier. Bishop returns in the time of the outbreak to warn the X-Men. In the future, a Friend of Humanity supporter spreads the plague on an electronic store clerk and puts the blame on Jubilee. The man turns the mob on Jubilee, and Storm rescues her. But back at the mansion, Beast cannot detect any virus on her. He takes it upon himself to find out more about the virus. Meanwhile, Cyclops shows the team that mutants all over are being quarantined as mass hysteria about the plague spreads. Storm also notices the man from the store and realizes it's orchestrated. To make things worse, Bishop turns up at such a scene and fights the mob, causing more chaos. The X-Men arrive at the spot and stop Bishop, as well as disperse the crowd. Bishop explains what happens in the future, while Beast returns and explains the rest. The person responsible turns out to be a scientist working for Creed. However, the scientist is actually Apocalypse. The next day, on a Senate hearing, Creed attempts to infect Beast when he is trying to speak, but Bishop stops him. It results in more misunderstandings as Creed gets infected himself. The team finds out what Creed was up to and follows Creed to his headquarters, where they are in for more surprises than they expected. Jean tries to locate Creed and senses Apocalypse. She asks the team to hurry. The scientist refuses to cure Creed and reveals his true self. The X-Men fight back against Apocalypse but fail to harm him. They manage to save Creed and destroy Apocalypse's virus. But as Apocalypse tries to kill the X-Men, the flashbacks ends. The time device claims that as mutants were spared, the antibodies were not developed, and over time, uncontrolled mutations destroyed the mutant race. The episode ends on a cliffhanger as Cable realizes that to preserve the future, he must ensure the plague happens. Time Fugitives, Part 2. Cable arrives in the past at the same time as Bishop and tries to stop him from warning the X-Men about the virus. Despite the most practical solution to kill Bishop, Cable can't bring himself to kill Bishop and let the Friends of Humanity scum win. Just like what happened before, the X-Men arrive at the spot, and this time they notice Cable trying to attack Bishop. While Wolverine tries to protect Bishop, others engage Cable. Cable's teleportation ability further enables him to escape from the X-Men. Bishop also tries to shoot Cable, but it turns out to be his hologram. Wolverine also chases after Cable, but the fight damages Cable's robotic arm, and he leaves to repair his arm. Cable tries to learn about X-Men, and turns out that he is already aware of Cyclops and Jean. Considering Cyclops and Jean's clones are his parents, this is all rather obvious. However, Cable also learns about Wolverine's ability to heal, which gives him an idea. The next day on the Senate hearing, Cable arrives during the time of panic and kidnaps Wolverine, while the others protect Bishop, who had jumped on Creed while saving Beast. Before Cable takes away Wolverine, Jean tries to read him, and from the looks of it, she not only gets informed about Apocalypse, but also that Cable is related to them. Jean keeps it to herself, and only tells Cyclops that Cable is important to their future. Cable takes Wolverine to a motel and tells him about Apocalypse, but Wolverine disbelieves him, and Cable has to stun him. Cable then takes Wolverine to Creed's headquarters, while the X-Men also break in. Just as the X-Men enter, Cable and Wolverine arrive. Cable directly addresses Apocalypse, forcing him to reveal himself. Cable attacks Apocalypse and ensures the virus falls on Wolverine, and he is affected. Cable tells Bishop it's the only way and explains that he just saved every future from the virus by letting Wolverine's immune system build antibodies. Cable and Bishop destroy the rest of the virus reserves, and all of them escape the facility as it explodes. Apocalypse also leaves. Bishop returns to his future and finds that nothing else has changed. The plague didn't happen. Beast also finds antibodies from Wolverine's blood, while Cable returns to his future and meets his son Tyler, who was once obliterated by the time realignment.
Show me that. Hey!
A Rogue's Tale. Mr. Sinister informs Mystique that Professor Xavier is currently out of the picture and it's time she gets back her daughter. Sending Mystique on this rather self-destructive path must be a part of a bigger plan. Nevertheless, Mystique soon springs into action as she lures the X-Men to a confrontation with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, Avalanche, Pyro, and Blob. During the fight, Rogue suddenly has flashes of a mysterious blonde woman, which sends her shrieking. The X-Men bring Rogue back to the mansion, but the mysterious woman keeps attacking Rogue in her mind, and as a result, Rogue accidentally hits her friends. Rogue looks for Jean, but before she gets any help, her mind gets overwhelmed and she flies away. Cyclops sends Storm after Rogue, but the vision of the woman pulls Rogue away from Storm to a hospital, where the mysterious woman is lying in a coma. Storm informs Cyclops and pursues Rogue, but she is knocked out by Mystique, who takes the form of Storm and confronts the X-Men boys, Gambit, Cyclops, and Wolverine. Mystique sends the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants to distract the X-Men, and she goes after Rogue. Mystique informs Rogue that Xavier has shut down important memories and asks Rogue to touch her. This episode is partially based on Uncanny X-Men issue 3269 and Avengers Annual issue 10. A flashback shows Rogue accidentally knocking out her first boyfriend and then being insulted by her father for being a mutant. Mystique took her in and helped her take control of her powers, but Mystique also forced Rogue to fight Carol Danvers, aka Miss Marvel, who is the Jane Doe in the hospital and haunting Rogue. However, as Mystique forced Rogue to hold on to Miss Marvel, Carol went into a coma and Rogue obtained her flying and super strength powers. Rogue left Mystique's gang when Professor Xavier helped her cope with the memories and powers. Although Rogue comes out of the memory run, Miss Marvel's personality tries to take hold of her. Rogue also rejects Mystique's help, but her mind becomes a battle zone, as Miss Marvel blames Rogue for stealing her powers and life. Jean intervenes and helps Rogue seal away as Miss Marvel. Rogue refuses to go back to Mystique and leaves with the X-Men, but she later returns with flowers to visit the comatose Carol. However, as Rogue lightly touches her before leaving, it seems to bring Carol back from her coma.
Life is sadly misdirected.
Beauty and the Beast. Beast is currently working in an eye hospital with his friend Alan Bolson. Alan has introduced Beast to the patient, Carly Crocker, and they seem to fall in love. However, when the Friends of Humanity attack the hospital, they ask Alan to take care of Carly and escape the ruthless mob. On the other hand, Wolverine has had enough and leaves on a solo mission to take down Graydon Creed. He pretends to be a man called John Logan who has been attacked by mutants to infiltrate the Friends of Humanity. In the comics, Wolverine's real name is revealed as James Howlett. Meanwhile, Xavier and Magneto are still surviving through the Savage Land and face off with a mutant called Amphibious. Amphibious captures Magneto and Professor X, but the duo escapes as giant snakes attack their boat. Back in the eye hospital, Beast learns that Carly's father doesn't want him around, and Beast doesn't want to trouble Carly. So he meets Carly and tells him that he won't be there for her operation. Later, Jean finds Beast distraught as Beast shares his disgust with his human form. Jean still convinces Beast to confess his feelings, and Hank appears just as Carly's bandages are removed after the operation. Carly was already aware of Hank being a mutant, but she also accepts his beastly form. However, Carly's dad throws a tantrum and Beast is about to leave. When he hears a shriek, he finds that Carly has been kidnapped. Back at Friends of Humanity's hideout, Logan succeeds in befriending Creed and gathering much information. He calls the X-Mansion and asks the team to bring a hologram projector and a file on someone. Cyclops further informs Logan about Carly being kidnapped by Friends of Humanity and being brought to the same building. As Creed interrogates Carly, Logan makes his way through the building and confronts Creed, revealing his mutant self. At the same time, Beast attacks the building. However, Beast is injured and Logan carries Beast as he escapes with Carly. They get surrounded by the mutant haters, but Cyclops blasts through the building and Jubilee projects Saber-tooth's image through it. In an unexpected twist of events, Saber-tooth is revealed to be Graydon Creed Sr. and father to Creed. However, comics and other versions have named Saber-tooth as Victor Creed. As Creed Jr. goes mad and slashes through the projection, his followers leave. Beast also breaks up with Carly and bids her adieu, while Carly's dad shares his gratitude. Mojovision. In a different dimension, an interdimensional network programmer called Mojo finds out that toy sales for his current hero Longshot are running low. The grotesque Mojo admonishes Longshot when Mojo's right-hand man, Major Domo, shows him the X-Man and asks him to bring around certain changes in the entertainment. Mojo reaches out to Cyclops and Jean while they are television shopping. Cyclops and Jean refuse his offer when Mojo attacks them from the television. Other X-Men come to their aid when Mojo sends his other assistant, Spiral, to capture them and bring them to his interdimensional program. For the first series, Storm and Cyclops are forced to star in a Miami Vice parody called Miami Mutants. However, it ends with Cyclops and Storm getting defeated. Mojo's action-packed games continue. As for the next show, he sends Rogue and Beast in a space show called Rogue Star. It's a parody of the original Star Trek and ends with Beast being taken away by alien monsters, while Rogue and the ship head to the sun. Finally, Jean and Wolverine are sent to the last program called I Dream of Jean. Clearly a spoof of I Dream of Jeannie. However, as Wolverine fights alien bots, Jean realizes it's a computer program and she can control it. Jean ensures the control room machines go haywire, and the disappointed fans leave as the X-Men return to the stage. They fight Mojo and drop a set of monitors on him. Longshot further forces Spiral to help the very confused X-Men return to their time. Spiral and Longshot then go hand in hand in their own way, and although Mojo emerges from the rubble and insists on making a new show, they seem to ignore him. Back in Savage Land, Magneto shows Xavier his citadel, while a creature called Sauron chases a wild woman. But Magneto stops Xavier from helping as the immensely powerful Sauron controls and takes away the woman.
Won't listen.
Reunion, Part 1. It's finally time we learn more about Savage Land and find a conclusion to this story. As Magneto and Xavier return to Xavier's plane, they get ambushed by Magneto's mutants. They are captured and taken to their new master, who is, surprise surprise, Mr. Sinister. Meanwhile, Jean, Cyclops and Wolverine follow Morph's distress call and head to find him in the Bluebird. As for Morph, he is busy playing Edward Hyde in a public performance of Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. However, Edward Hyde is another Marvel Comics villain, and this might be considered his first cartoon appearance. Moving on it seems Mr. Sinister planned it all and is still trying to control Morph. His nasty boys capture the three mutants, whilst back in Savage Land, a man called Kazar and his pet saber-tooth cat Zabu help Magneto and Xavier escape. Kazar shows anger over Magneto for changing inhibitors to mutants and building his citadel. Although Magneto has something else in mind, it clearly did not turn out the way he wanted. Kazar further informs that his wife, Shana the She-Devil, is imprisoned by Sauron. Thanks to Xavier, Kazar comes to a truce, and with Magneto's help, they infiltrate the Citadel, only to encounter the mutants as they enter it. Kazar and Zabu jump back into the river to escape, while a mutant called Brainchild captures Magneto and Xavier. Meanwhile, Wolverine, Cyclops and Jean continue to struggle and fight Mr. Sinister and his nasty boys. However, the uncontrollable Morph still betrays them, and Sinister leaves with Jean, leaving Wolverine and Cyclops stranded. Mr. Sinister brings Jean and Morph to the Citadel, and Jean is relieved to find Professor Xavier. Morph refuses to work for Mr. Sinister anymore and shows a willingness to join the X-Men, for which Mr. Sinister restrains Morph. Despite Xavier's immense power, Sauron still succeeds in making Xavier his puppet. Under Sinister's order, Xavier calls the rest of the X-Men and gives them coordinates to meet. However, Cyclops and Wolverine return with more information, and the X-Men set off to free their friends. Reunion, Part 2. The X-Men arrive at Savage Land and find their powers are gone, thanks to a machine set up by Mr. Sinister. However, the mutants have their powers, and so do the Nasty Boys, albeit with the help of a belt. They capture the X-Men, all except Wolverine, who escapes Vertigo's clutches and falls into a river. As Wolverine makes a run for it, the mutants chase after him. Wolverine still has the powers of his claws, as a comic called Fatal Attractions revealed that Wolverine was born with those claws, which are coated with adamantium. Wolverine also escapes dinosaurs and comes across Kazar and Zabu. Kazar assumes Wolverine works for Sinister and fights him until Wolverine declares otherwise. They finally come to a term, and after hijacking a mutated raptor, Kazar and Wolverine ride off to the Citadel. Back in the Citadel, Sinister imprisons all the X-Men and relates his plans to use their DNA in creating a new race of mutants. For a demonstration, he saps Magneto's strength and gives it to Vertigo, making her stronger. Vertigo uses her powers on the X-Men when Rogue and Gambit finally confess their feelings for each other. They even share a kiss before Rogue is taken away. Now, something interesting about Mr. Sinister. The complicated design of the Sinister character was troubling, and so it was difficult to make him do a 360-degree turn. Wolverine and Kazar enter the Citadel, and while Kazar goes his own way to free Shanna and the natives, Wolverine goes looking for the X-Men. Wolverine finds them and tries to attack, but Vertigo attacks back. Kazar frees his people and they come for help. Sinister and his mutants stop them from entering, but the distraction is enough for Wolverine to free his friends. Xavier, Morph and others destroy the power dampening machine which returns the powers to the X-Men. Although Sinister puppeteers Morph to work for him, Xavier helps Morph to have control. The X-Men and Magneto defeat the mutants and Nasty Boys, while Jean finishes Sinister and disperses his pieces into the air. As the heroes escape, Sauron destroyed the Citadel. Magneto and Xavier bid goodbye as Xavier returns to the Institute with the X-Men and Morph. However, it appears Sinister will be back, while Sauron plans to take over the Savage Land. Season 3, Out of the Past, Part 1. Leech gets chased by a bunch of cybernetically modified mercenaries. Leech has stolen from the mercenary group called Reavers, and although the Morlocks fight the Reavers, they are captured. Leech tells the Reavers' leader, Lady Deathstrike, about a buried treasure and takes her to it. It turns out to be an alien ship buried for centuries. However, as Lady Deathstrike strikes at the alien ship with her adamantium talons, it causes an energy explosion, which even affects Professor Xavier, and he uses Cerebro to find out more. Meanwhile, Lady Deathstrike realizes a human with adamantium claws can open it. She makes Leech call the X-Mansion and interrupt Wolverine, Gambit, and Jubilee's basketball game. This scene is loosely based on X-Men Volume 2, Issue 4. Also, unlike the series, the Reavers are former mercenaries of the Hellfire Club, which has not yet been introduced. Leech tells Wolverine that Yuriko needs him. As Wolverine leaves to meet, Jubilee forces Gambit to tag along with her to follow him. While passing through the underground tunnels, Wolverine remembers his ex-lover, Yuriko Oyama. Wolverine left Yuriko to go on a mission when he got captured by the Professor and Dr. Cornelius, who infused adamantium into his bones for the Weapon X program. However, after escaping the lab, Wolverine returned to Yuriko to find her missing. Wolverine comes out of his reverie and gets attacked by the Reavers, and Yuriko finally confronts him, revealing that she is Lady Deathstrike. Yuriko claims she voluntarily changed herself to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her father, Professor Oyama. Wolverine denies killing him, and the Reavers stop Deathstrike from killing Wolverine. The Reavers take Wolverine to the alien ship, and after he is released, Wolverine fights back to the Reavers. Gambit and Jubilee also arrive to join the battle, and the altercation leads to Wolverine accidentally opening the alien ship, and in doing so, he may have unleashed great terror.
That's the answer.
Out of the Past, Part 2. Professor Xavier has realized that the messages on a ship were warning, but it was too late, and Wolverine opened the ship. An entity emerges from the ship and began sapping the life force from the Reaver mercenaries and Jubilee. Wolverine carries the unconscious Jubilee and escapes with Gambit and Lady Deathstrike. The creature follows through a tunnel and also attacks the captured Morlocks. Meanwhile, Professor Xavier physically calls Beast, Cyclops, and Jean. All of this while the creature continues to follow Wolverine and the team, while the spirits of Jubilee and the mercenaries call to them. Wolverine asks Gambit to leave with Jubilee, as he and Deathstrike stay back to confront the creature. However, as they fight, Yuriko also falls victim to the gaseous creature. Thankfully, Xavier returns with the rest of the X-Men, and yes, Storm is missing in action. Xavier and Beast move forward to investigate the alien vessel from where the creature escaped, while the rest decide to pursue the Beast and stop it from attacking others. Professor Xavier touches the alien writing on a broken glass vessel outside the ship and suddenly can read the alien language. He finds out it was a beast called the Spirit Drinker that was shipped off, and the ship was not supposed to be opened. He passes the information to Jean, which helps the team to fight the Spirit Drinker. The Spirit Drinker is supposed to be from the Shi'ar Empire, and in the comics, Professor Xavier Hoverchair is built by Forge based on Shi'ar tech. However, here he has the hoverchair before he met Forge on the Shi'ar, who were officially introduced. The Spirit Drinker reaches the subway, where Wolverine fights the monster and learns that shockwaves can destroy it. Gambit finally destroys the creature and everyone's spirits return to their bodies. Yuriko also takes her leave to come back and fight another day, while Professor Xavier realizes more danger lies ahead for them. The Phoenix Saga, Part 1, Sacrifice. An alien war rages somewhere in space and a woman's voice calls out to Charles Xavier for help. Xavier calls the team to the war room, And while visions from the past episode still haunt him, Xavier asks the team to board the Star Corps space shuttle and go to the Eagle 1 space station. Rogue is missing in this episode, and all except Storm sneaks into NASA. Jubilee intentionally gets caught by the guards, allowing the rest of the team to sneak into the launching pad. Jean knocks them out with her telekinesis and mind controls the leader, Dr. Peter Corbeau. As the shuttle launches into space, Storm rescues Jubilee from the guards. Star Corps reaches Eagle 1, but some sort of force removes Jean's mind control, and Dr. Corbeau is shocked to find that he is leading a team of X-Men instead of real astronauts. A gas leak further intensifies and knocks out the team. An alien identifying himself as an agent of the Shi'ar Empire called Eric the Red stands in the doorway. He consults Duken Neramami, the Emperor, and realizes that somehow the rebel Lilandra has involved in sending the mutant crew instead of the astronauts. This episode is again loosely based on X-Men issues 97 to 100. Eric the Red orders the space station crew to open the airlock. Jean wakes up in time and tries to telekinetically stop the staff, only to realize a mind-controlled chip is controlling the crew. She still destroys the controls and saves her friends from being thrown into space. Jean explains everything to the fellow X-Men, whilst Eric the Red explains a wormhole to Dr. Corbeau and how his job is to intercept Lilandra, who is supposed to arrive through the wormhole. Eric the Red also shows that he has an energy weapon to destroy Lilandra's ship, and he plans to fire it from the primitive Earth space station. As Eric the Red continues to insult Earth, the X-Men arrive and attack Eric the Red. The X-Men also destroy the energy weapon and save Lilandra's ship. While Eric the Red and 2 crew members escape, Dr. Corbeau and the X-Men also take their shuttle to escape the Eagle 1, which soon explodes. Eric the Red continues to attack Lilandra's ship upon the Emperor's instruction. Meanwhile, the Star Corps finds itself in the direct path of the energy tail, following Lilandra's ship. Corbeau and Beast note that the Sun Probe can protect them during their return to Earth, but the ship needs to be piloted, and Jean volunteers. However, the shield she generated to protect herself proves useless to the Phoenix force that arises.
It's all in your mind!
The Phoenix Saga, Part 2, The Dark Shroud. The Phoenix Force enters Jean's body, and she manages to get the shuttle back to Earth. However, as everybody exits the probe, Jean resurfaces as the Phoenix, only to faint and fall. Later in the hospital, Jean recovers, while Cyclops and Professor Xavier get into an argument about their mutual concern for Jean. For reasons unknown, Beast is wearing a Howard the Duck t-shirt in the hospital. As Xavier tries to leave with his own plane, a psychic link from Lilandra causes his dark side to escape. As a psychic projection, the dark Xavier confronts Wolverine in a subway train and shows him an illusion of Yuriko, Saber-tooth, and Deadpool. Dark Xavier also tries to get Wolverine run over, but he survives and follows the projection, as it now attacks Gambit and Jubilee. Wolverine joins the duo in fighting Dark Xavier, but as the police arrive, he vanishes. As Xavier has also called upon Storm, she approaches the trio and creates a mist, allowing them to escape. The dark side now approaches Cyclops and attacks him, but Jean realizes it's just a psychic projection and destroys the dark side within a second. The Phoenix Force's power obviously comes in handy. As Jean locates the real Professor Xavier, the X-Men find him on the rooftop, and Xavier explains everything to his X-Men family. However, someone sneakily records them, and it is live broadcast to Eric the Red, who realizes Xavier is the key, and that Lilandra is trying to contact him. This episode is somewhat based on X-Men issues 101 and 106. Xavier asks Cyclops to lead the team, and he decides to take time for rehabilitation. However, as he reaches Muir Island, he finds Moira McTaggart is accompanied by her fiancé, Sean Cassidy. Charles feels lonely seeing Moira with her fiancé, but not for long, as Lilandra reaches out to him again. And this time, Xavier establishes contact. Finally, Lilandra physically appears in Xavier's room and introduces herself as the sister of the Shi'ar Emperor, Duken Neramani. Lilandra claims to have stolen the Makran crystal from the Shi'ar temple, which her brother Duken would have used to bring destruction. Duken's forces have been hunting her, but Lilandra claims to have a bond with Charles and seeks his help. They are further interrupted by Juggernaut as he breaks into the room, and the episode ends on a cliffhanger.
Hair Day! Why don't you just flip back where you... Huh?
The Phoenix Saga, Part 3, Cry of the Banshee. Moira and Sean finally notice something is going on inside Charles's room and rush to help him. Xavier and Lilandra try to stop Juggernaut, but someone attacks Xavier from behind, and Juggernaut is able to kidnap Lilandra while he throws Xavier off the cliff. Sean reveals he is a mutant called Banshee, using his supersonic scream to defy gravity and save Xavier. However, when Moira refuses to believe Xavier and thinks he is hallucinating, Xavier reaches out to his X-Men. Meanwhile, the Phoenix overpowers Jean and they become one. Rogue feels guilty for being on another mission, as she could have helped them on the space mission. Nevertheless, Cyclops lets the rest of the team travel to Muir Island, while he and Storm stay back to look after Jean. Upon their arrival, Wolverine and Sean have a rocky start, as Sean believes Moira, while Wolverine believes his friend Charles. Wolverine can even smell Juggernaut. On the other hand, at Cassidy's keep, Juggernaut and Black Tom, the other person who helped with the kidnapping, seek payment from Eric the Red. As Eric refuses to pay, Juggernaut beats him, and Eric agrees to pay. Juggernaut brings Lilandra to Eric, but Lilandra sends a psychic message to Xavier about the coat of arms she saw in the castle. Sean recognizes it as the family symbol and takes the X-Men to rescue Lilandra. Black Tom is shown as Sean Cassidy's brother, but as per the comics, they are cousins. On that note, the episode is loosely based on X-Men issues 102 to 105. The X-Men and Sean battle it out with Eric the Red, Juggernaut and Black Tom, while the X-Men manage to stop the villains from escaping with Lilandra. However, another guard to the Shi'ar Imperial throne, called the Gladiator, appears. Lilandra pleads to Gladiator's sense of honor, but he only serves the throne and throws Juggernaut far away when he protests. Lilandra then calls for help, and the Phoenix Jean rises. She flies to Muir Island and defeats Gladiator. Phoenix sends Gladiator back to D'Ken and claims to be the guardian of the M'Kan crystal. She also warns Lilandra that D'Ken has travelled through a wormhole and is approaching Earth. The Phoenix Saga, Part 4, The Star Jammers. After Jean, now Phoenix, sends Gladiator away, Cyclops, Beast and Storm arrive at Cassidy Keep. Jean informs Cyclops that to save several galaxies they must leave. Leaving Xavier, Storm and Jubilee behind, Jean takes Lilandra and the rest of the X-Men to Lilandra's ship. This scene also features Captain Britain watching her leave, while on the Hellfire Club and Doctor Strange sense her presence. On board her ship, Lilandra shows the crystal to the X-Men when an intergalactic pirate ship of the Starjammers attacks them. The X-Men fight back and could have won, but Jean stops Cyclops from attacking their leader, Corsair. The Starjammers take the crystal and Cyclops as they escape Lilandra's ship. Jean hides the fact that Corsair is actually Cyclops' father. Meanwhile, Gladiator and Eric the Red arrive on the Imperial ship, as Gladiator informs D'Ken of the Phoenix. Corsair suddenly calls D'Ken and offers the crystal as well as Cyclops in exchange for half of the Imperial wealth. D'Ken agrees, but plans to finish Corsair after the exchange. Corsair personally tells Cyclops to kill D'Ken with his optic blast as he wants revenge on D'Ken for killing his wife, which Cyclops is currently unaware is his mother. Elsewhere, Lilandra's ship pursues the Starjammer, but Jean cannot take them to the ship as she is too weak and recovering her powers. Cyclops and Corsair seem to bond as they board the Imperial fleet. Jean establishes a psychic contact with Scott, which helps her take to the X-Men and Lilandra to the ship. On a fun note, Jean Grey's screams and moans have fan-name term for their own Jean-gasms, and we can't deny that it sounds awfully close. As D'Ken calls on the Imperial Guards to kill Corsair and Cyclops, the X-Men arrive and it's a confrontation. The X-Men manage to get the crystal and escape the Imperial Guard, but D'Ken catches up to Lilandra and unlocks the crystal. Jean tries to stop him, but it's too late. The Phoenix Saga, Part 5, Child of Light. D'Ken becomes one with the crystal, and as Jean explains, he enters it to create his own universe. Corsair orders his pirates on board the Starjammer to escape, while Phoenix takes the X-Men, Lilandra, Corsair, and the Imperial Guards to the Starjammer ship. Jean returns to the Imperial fleet and tries to understand the crystal, but it absorbs her. It starts consuming everything, and soon it engulfs the Starjammer's ship. Meanwhile, on Earth, Jubilee notices the sun is fading, and Storm reports destruction across the planet. Superheroes across the world, including Spider-Man and War Machine, dive into saving people. However, only Spider-Man's arm makes a cameo in the scene, which is also considered a crossover with Spider-Man, the animated series, 1994. In fact, the success of X-Men, the animated series, made way for the Spider-Man series. Now back inside the crystal, the passengers of the Starjammer ship find themselves alive and Jean unconscious. D'Ken emerges from the ground and shows how he controls everything and every land inside the crystal. The X-Men and Gladiator try to fight him, but fail miserably. Well, Gladiator has realized his mistake and calls Lilandra the Empress. And in fact, the entire Imperial Guard now consider her as the Queen. But D'Ken tries to crush Lilandra and rule the universe. However, the Phoenix recovers and she takes all of them back to Landra's starship. Jean explains to Scott that she has found a hole in the crystal matrix that contained its power. She bids a teary and romantic goodbye to Scott and her friends. As Phoenix, Jean gains strength from remembering all her X-Men teammates, which enables her to contain the crystal. She takes it far away to the sun. The universe and Earth return to normal. Landra bids goodbye to Charles as he refuses to join her until humans and mutants are at peace. They share a kiss, but Cyclops is still heartbroken and Charles tells him not to lose hope.
Rise up! Protect me!
Savage Land, A Savage Heart, Part 1. The segment starts with Khazar and the villagers fighting Sauron and his army, but Sauron is defeated as he weakens, and a woman named Zaladane saves him from Khazar and the others. Zaladane introduces herself as the High Priestess worshipping the god Garac. As Sauron turns to his human self, Zaladane sends him to New York in Magneto's plane. In the city, Sauron's alter ego, Kal Lycos, roams weakly when he senses the mutant energy from Wolverine and saps it. It reverts him to Sauron, who flies away, and Beast calls Rogue and Storm to alert them. However, Sauron uses his hypnotic ability on Rogue and Storm, which helps him kidnap Storm and take her back to the Savage Land. The X-Men group of Wolverine, Beast, Rogue and Jubilee follows. Meanwhile, in Savage Lands, Zaladane tells Sauron that within Storm resides a great power, and Sauron uses his ability to make Storm lose control. Sauron, who absorbs her energy and feels stronger than ever. However, it's only a ploy by Zaladane to use the Weather Witch Storm's power to summon her master, Garac. Sauron's name was definitely taken from Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, which was very new and popular when the character was introduced in the comics. However, Sauron was going to be a werewolf, but the Comics Code Authority forbade it, and so his alter ego was named Kal Lycos, as in from lichens. As the X-Men land in Savage Land, they are chased by dinosaurs when Khazar and Zabu come to their rescue. Jubilee lands in mud, and later she is given some animal skin to wear, which doesn't look too bad on her. Nonetheless, Khazar explains that Garok's stone statue has suddenly appeared in the village, and then they miraculously won the fight against Sauron. Sauron's army suddenly attacks the village, and they try to capture the X-Men, but the X-Men are able to defeat Sauron's army, while Jubilee succeeds in subduing Sauron, who falls through trees and turns into Karl. Khazar recognizes Karl and claims he was a good man. Karl confesses that he was turned to Sauron by Magneto, and now he needs mutant energy to survive. Meanwhile, Zaladane frees Storm, who unleashes her full power. Savage Land, Savage Heart, Part 2. Storm goes savage as she uses the power of the elementals to unleash storms, rain and destruction. It helps Garac to fuse with the Savage Land, which starts to crystallize. Jubilee tries to approach Storm with newfound confidence, but Storm pushes her away, and the X-Men along with Khazar and Karl hide in a cave from society. Karl volunteers to absorb Storm's energy, which will calm her down. Although it has the risks of turning Karl into Sauron, that's a risk that they must take. The X-Men and Khazar distract Storm as Rogue takes Karl near her. Karl absorbs too much energy and transforms back into Sauron, while Rogue catches Storm and takes her to the village. With the weather finally normal, the villagers pray to Garac. Rogue informs Beast that she could see Zaladane in Sauron's memories, as Khazar recognizes her as the High Priestess of Garac. Meanwhile, Storm wakes up and realizes Garac is evil, and so she destroys Garoc's statue in the village, and in fact, she again goes berserk, as the uncontrolled power flows through Storm. In the meantime, Sauron returns to Zaladane and helps her out. But Zaladane refuses and claims that Sauron has outlined his need. As Garac restrains Sauron, he tells the story of how he was the one who ruled Savage Land until someone else appeared and defeated Garac. This man is High Evolutionary, a Marvel Comics villain known for creating the New Men and most famously Rocket Raccoon in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Volume 3, 2003 movie, the High Evolutionary defeated Garac and imprisoned him on Earth in stone form. However, when Mr. Sinister brought the X-Men to the Savage Land, Storm's powers awakened Garac. Garac further declares that he needs the full potential of Storm's power for his complete resurrection, and that's why Zaladane has ensured Karl went to the city and kidnapped Storm. Back in the village, Storm insists on restraining her while the land turns grey. Storm goes against Garac and starts fighting him. However, her power seems only to strengthen him, and Garac emerges from the mountains. Storm refuses to hear any suggestions, but Rogue stops Storm after some tries. Sauron also manages to free himself and goes against Garac as Garac tries to absorb the volcano's energy. It makes Sauron larger and monstrous. As Sauron and Garac fight, there is a large explosion, but Garac and Sauron are both defeated for good. While Sauron has turned back to Khal, his nightmarish life is finally over. The X-Men recover Storm and treat her in the Blackbird.
Get out of here.
Apocalypse is eternal.
Obsession. Archangel Warren Worthington III has become obsessed with destroying Apocalypse for ruining his life. He obtains a scroll which shows a supposedly weak spot for killing the supposedly immortal being. Archangel tracks Apocalypse and attacks him at Liberty Island. At the same time, the X-Men discover Apocalypse's ship with the help of the Shi'ar technology they have incorporated into their own tech. They are further alerted to the fight at Liberty Island and join Archangel in his fight. However, they fail to even put a scratch on Apocalypse. As Archangel faints, Rogue saves him and the X-Men take him back to the mansion. Professor Xavier shows Wolverine and Cyclops a deliberate trail left by Apocalypse. The X-Men decide to investigate the ship, as Beast believes he can find a weapon to defeat Apocalypse. Meanwhile, Rogue seems to share Archangel's feeling of hatred for Apocalypse, but Gambit is not too happy with their growing friendship. Rogue follows Archangel, I must say rather foolishly, and the boyfriend follows as they track down Apocalypse. This episode was supposed to have taken place between two other episodes, No Mutant is an Island and Longshot, which eventually aired in 1996. Beast notes the ship is a sentient being and bonds with it. He reviews the ship's programming and sets a force field trap for Apocalypse. Beast tests it with Wolverine's help. However, Apocalypse has set his own trap for the intruders, and the X-Men get entrapped in the ship. Archangel confronts Apocalypse at Coney Island, and Rogue joins him after refusing to listen to any words of reason from Gambit. Apocalypse also seems to be aware of the X-Men on his ship and heads to it. As Apocalypse enters the ship, Beast entraps him, but Archangel has arrived following Apocalypse and continues to attack him. As the force field saves Apocalypse from Archangel's attack, he attacks Beast in mad rage. As a result, the ship seems to have been damaged. Apocalypse overrides the force field and reveals that he took the form of the man who gave the map to Archangel, indicating that it was a trap laid by Apocalypse to lure in Archangel. Nonetheless, the ship directs Beast to find the emergency controls, which finally allows him to lock in the Apocalypse. However, it locks out Gambit, who went to save an unconscious Archangel. The ship uses the last bit of energy to help them escape and then sends Apocalypse far into deep space. The ship falls dead into the sea as Beast mourns it. However, Archangel's vengeance still blinds him, and Rogue realizes her fault and feels guilty.
Cycling.
Dark Phoenix, Part 1. Dazzled. At Muir Island, Professor Xavier tries to get rid of the Phoenix from Jean's body but fails to do so. In New York, Cyclops enjoys a performance of Dazzler with Gambit, but constantly worries about Jean. He notices a man trying to kidnap Dazzler and helps her. Dazzler seems to have left an impression on Cyclops as he returns home, but as Jean returns with Professor Xavier, he embraces her. However, the Phoenix in her makes Jean distraught. Meanwhile, the man trying to kidnap Dazzler is Pierce from the Inner Circle. He was on a mission to make Dazzler join the Inner Circle. The Hellfire Club is named Inner Circle Club for obvious censorship issues surrounding the use of the word Hellfire. Pierce meets the Inner Circle members at the club where he gets rebuked for failing to recruit Dazzler. However, Emma Frost reports that the Phoenix is possessing Jean. Emma explains to the members how the Phoenix possessed Jean, and after placing the Macron crystal in the sun, the Phoenix returned to Earth in Jean's body, when Professor Xavier found her. The Inner Circle Club decides to use Jean, or rather Phoenix, for their own benefit. As Jean sleeps, Emma Frost helps fellow club member Jason Wingard, aka Mastermind, to enter Jean's mind and make her believe they are from another era and engaged to each other. However, Emma senses that Jean's bonding with Cyclops is protecting her. This 4-part Dark Phoenix segment is based on a story of the same name published in Uncanny X-Men issue 129 to 138. As Phoenix takes over Jean, she escapes the mansion and goes to the club where Dazzler is performing. She witnesses Dazzler kissing Cyclops and misunderstands him. However, Wingard appears and Jean kisses him, believing him to be her fiancé. As Jean lives with him, Cyclops follows, and Dazzler tells him it's the same guys who tried to kidnap him. The X-Men break into the Inner Circle Club mansion, where a hypnotized Jean marries Wingard. The X-Men fight the Inner Circle, and Storm almost defeats them, until Jean defeats Storm, revealing she is now Phoenix.
I don't believe it!
Dark Phoenix, Part 2, The Inner Circle. The Inner Circle has captured the X-Men, all except Wolverine, who makes his way through the building. Professor Xavier tries to reach out to Cyclops, but faces a barrier. Cerebro informs that this barrier is partly being put in place by someone else, and it turns out Emma Frost is blocking Xavier from tracking the X-Men. However, there is an internal clash amongst the Inner Circle, and Shaw tries to use Jean to exert his dominance. Frost warns the Inner Circle that Jean can remember the truth at any moment, but Mastermind claims that he can completely control the dark part of Jean's emotions. The Inner Circle hails Jean as their new queen to use her, but Cyclops tries to contact Jean through his mind. Frost realizes this and helps Mastermind invade her mind. Mastermind duels Scott in Jean's mind and injures him, causing Cyclops physical pain. However, Emma notes that Cyclops still has an emotional link with Jean Grey, which is protecting him, and Sebastian Shaw mocks Wingard for not being able to control Jean. To prove otherwise, Mastermind asks Jean to finish off all the X-Men. Jean is interrupted by Wolverine, who enters the room after taking down several guards. While Jean tries to hurt Wolverine, the Inner Circle has a round of voting where they vote for Wingard to be their new chairman. Just like Jean Grey, Catherine Disher, the person voicing the role, had a rough time managing demanding and busy schedules. In fact, she also performed whilst being pregnant with Cedric Smith's child, who ironically voiced Professor X. Meanwhile, Wolverine's memories help Jean to momentarily recover, but Mastermind orders Jean to kill Shaw, which makes Jean turn on them. Jean releases the X-Men from their restraints and asks them to fend for themselves. The tables turn for a bit as the X-Men are able to defeat the Inner Circle, but the club members are able to escape. Wingard finds Jean on the rooftop, but Jean turns on him, removing his illusions and exposing his true aged appearance. She turns into the Dark Phoenix and leaves.
Stop! I won't allow you to...
Dark Phoenix, Part 3, The Dark Phoenix. The Dark Phoenix, wielding her immense power, is ready to destroy everything and everyone. Scott tried to reach out to Jean, but to no avail, as the Phoenix takes over every time. The X-Men fight the Dark Phoenix, but it just doesn't affect her. However, after wounding Cyclops, Jean feels guilty, and the Dark Phoenix leaves Earth. As she travels into deep space, Doctor Strange, Mighty Thor, Uatu the Watcher, and Eternity feel her power. A Shi'ar scout ship intercepts the Dark Phoenix as she enters a sun and devours a star system. The scouts try to destroy Dark Phoenix, but she damages the ship and disappears. The Shi'ar scouts inform their Empress of the development, and Landra decides to visit Earth. Back on Earth, Cyclops suddenly feels Jean returning and senses that she is in her childhood home. Jean enjoys the memories of her childhood when Professor X and the X-Men attacked her at home. They placed a scrambling device on her, which was created by Beast to temporarily disable Jean's mind. However, the Dark Phoenix proves too powerful for the device to work. Logan attempts to kill Jean, and even she pleads with Wolverine to kill her, but Logan can't bring himself to do it, and the Dark Phoenix takes over. Cyclops makes a last try to reach out to Jean, and the distraction allows Professor X to stunt Jean for a while. The Dark Phoenix recovers, but Professor X battles it out with Jean in her mind. He manages to bind the Dark Phoenix inside her with Jean's help, but Lilandra and the Shi'ar Imperial Guard arrive on Earth to finish off the Dark Phoenix, and along with her, Jean Grey.
Give a gal a little credit.
Dark Phoenix, Part 4, The Fate of the Phoenix. To save Jean from being killed by the Shi'ar, Professor Xavier challenges Lilandra's Imperial Guard for a duel of honor that will be fought by all the X-Men present. This obviously means everybody except Jubilee, who has been missing in this storyline. Lilandra is deeply saddened by the situation and did not want it to come to this, but as Empress she is bound by duty. She is further implored by the Supreme Intelligence and Skrull Empress to take care of Phoenix business. To begin the match, Lilandra beams down the X-Men, to the oxygenated blue area of the moon. Now this has become a common place of abode in the Marvel lore, as both Uatu the Watcher and the Inhumans have lived in this place at one moment of time or another. The battle begins with the X-Men divide into pairs of two, except for Rogue, who can handle on her own. Gambit and Storm are the first to be defeated, followed by Rogue, Wolverine and Beast. Jean and Cyclops are the last to try to hold the fort. Jean wears her iconic Marvel Girl costume from the 1960s, as apparently this is the same costume she wore when she met Scott for the first time. Meanwhile, Lilandra and Charles Xavier also share angsty moments as the lovers are currently standing at opposing corners, each wanting the other to lose. When Cyclops is subdued, Jean cries over him and the Phoenix once more gets unlocked. Professor X asks his X-Men to wake up and stop Phoenix, but even though they succeed, it is only temporarily. Jean finally gains control over herself and sacrifices herself for Lilandra to blow her up. Once it's over, Professor X and Cyclops get confrontational with Lilandra, but it turns out the Phoenix leaves. She is no longer the Dark Phoenix and is ready to leave Jean's body. However, Jean needs sparks from every X-Men to live once again. As Jean lives, the X-Men are teleported back to their mansion, while Lilandra bids goodbye to Charles.
Depot. I think the government grabbed Lorna.
Bummer.
Cold comfort. When Iceman Bobby Drake attacks a federal facility, Professor X is informed of the same, and he rallies Wolverine, Cyclops and Beast to apprehend him, leaving the overeager Jubilee to prepare the infirmary. However, it seems there's a lot of hidden drama and issues that have made Cyclops really hate Bobby's guts, and Bobby would easily go with the X-Men. Cyclops knocks him out during a confrontation, and Xavier uses his psychic abilities to help the X-Men boys escape with him. Back at the mansion, Cyclops and Bobby get into a heated argument, as Bobby refuses to be bogged down by the rules and regulations of the X-Men, and reasons this is why he'd quit. To stop him from leaving, Xavier suspends him in a machine created by using Shi'ar technology for healing. However, an inquisitive little Jubilee searches video files on Iceman, but Wolverine catches her and warns her against him. Iceman is featured as the original team member who came and left before Wolverine joined the team. Beast asks Iceman why he attacked the federal base. Bobby tells his story and Jubilee overhears them. Bobby recollects fighting beside X-Men and following Professor X's orders. Some scenes feature the original team fighting Magneto. It's a real shame that we've covered half the series and a real fight between Xavier's team and Magneto's team, as shown in the opening sequence, hasn't transpired yet. Nevertheless, Bobby had quit the team when he nearly lost his girlfriend and fellow X-Men, Lorna. Lorna joined him and together lived a happy life until the mutant-hating crisis emerged, and Lorna wanted them to act. Bobby had refused, and one day he returned home to find her house trashed and Lorna missing with a note about the federal unit's location. Although Beast still refuses to release Bobby, Jubilee helps him escape and joins him to enter the federal secret base. The X-Men follow them and end up in the same facility where they encounter other mutants like Forge, Havoc, Wolfsbane, Strong Guy, Multiple Man, and Quicksilver. In the comics, Lorna aka Polaris and Quicksilver are Magneto's children. As the X-Men fight the X-Factor team, Cyclops and Havoc find their powers cancelling each other. In the comics, they are siblings, and according to mutant lore, siblings cannot harm one another. The fighting ends when Professor Xavier intervenes, and Bobby helps the X-Men win. They find out that Lorna is still alive and well, having joined the X-Factor team, which is a team of mutants working for the government. Unfortunately for Bobby, Lorna has found love in Havoc. Forge claims they were only fighting the X-Men to get some pointers, making Wolverine very angry. The heartbroken Iceman and the X-Men leave, but Bobby still refuses to be part of the team and bids adieu.
Picnic later. Let's go.
Orphan's End. The Starjammer ship gets chased by a Shi'ar ship on Earth, and Commander Ragnar calls the X-Men to get their assistance in catching the fugitives. Cyclops and Storm respond to the call, but the fugitive in question turns out to be Corsair. When the Starjammer ship falls into a river, Cyclops rescues Corsair and gets hold of his locket. He is shocked to find that it has a picture of Scott with his mum, Catherine Summers, and younger brother, Alex Summers. As it becomes clear that Corsair is actually Scott's dad, Christopher Summers, Scott asks Storm to buy him some time so that he can get a little bit more clarity on the situation. Storm helps the father and son to escape Commander Ragnar's attack and travel underground to reach one of the X-Men's planes, which they take to escape Ragnar On their way, Christopher explains how years ago his plane was attacked by a Shi'ar starship, and Christopher used the last parachute to help his sons escape. However, when the parachute caught fire, Chris and Kate assumed that their sons had perished. The couple was further teleported into the starship commandeered by Rachna. Corsair claims that they were to be used as biological specimens, and Rachna killed Catherine. This seems to soften up Cyclops, who was extremely upset when his dad for abandoning them and for growing up in an orphanage. Speaking of abandonment issues, the series led its own comic adaptations, which were cancelled in 1996, but the characters return in X-Men 92 in 2015, a tie-in with the Secret Wars event. The Shi'ar Starcruiser still seems to follow the X-Men Dove flight and destroys it just as Cyclops, Corsair and Storm escape. Rachna further lies to Cyclops that the pirates have abducted a witness to the Lord Chamberlain's fortune, but Corsair argue it's the other way around, and the pirates actually protecting the witness from Rachna, who's actually a bad cop. Cyclops refuses to believe him and takes Corsair hostage to Rachna to find out who is telling the truth. He asks Storm to find the witness called Jandra and protect her. However, the pirates misunderstand Storm and attack her, but soon learn the truth that Jandra is a witness to a murder committed by the Lord Chamberlain. Rachna also stops Cyclops from interfering as he goes to interrogate Corsair, but the navigator of the ship releases Cyclops. The navigator shows Cyclops that Rachna plans to murder Jandra, and it was the navigator who went to Corsair for help. Cyclops and Navigator help Corsair free, and the three escape. The pirates and Storm further destroy the Starcruiser and capture Rachna. Later, the Cyclops asks his dad to stay back for a while, as they have much to share. The Juggernaut Returns. In this story, a man called Eugene enters the cave of Cyttorak and finds an inscription on the ruby of Cyttorak. Meanwhile, Professor X's brother, Cain Marco, aka Juggernaut, arrives in New York and starts with his usual destruction. As he approaches the Institute, Professor X calls his X-Men for help. However, everyone seems out of reach. Juggernaut directly breaks into the Danger Room, and Professor X tries to use the Danger Room simulation to stop Juggernaut. The simulation features several robots posing as Juggernaut, as well as the Incredible Hulk simulation. Beast is also in the room and tries to stop Juggernaut, to no avail. However, Professor X is saved when Eugene reads aloud the inscription, which turns him into the Juggernaut. Cain Marco loses his power, but the roof collapses on him. Beast saves Professor X, while Storm and Rogue return. Professor X asks them to pull out Cain from the rubble, and although Rogue doesn't seem to like the idea, she is forced to do so. Interestingly, Charles Xavier's design, the way his powers are used, and his design of his hoverchair are directly referenced in Doctor Strange of the Multiverse of Madness 2022. Moving on, Eugene feels a burst of confidence as the Juggernaut and goes clubbing. He tries to pick up girls, but picks up walls instead. Meanwhile, without the power of the Juggernaut, Cain seems to be dying from the injuries he sustained, and Charles reaches out to him in his mind. In the meantime, Cyclops and Wolverine are sent to find the other Juggernaut and get the ruby from him. Although they are not too happy about it either, the duo find Eugene in a nightclub and snatch away the ruby from him. In Cain's mind, Xavier learns that not only did Cain hate him since they were a child, but his stepfather married Xavier's mother only for her money. Cain hated Charles, as Cain's dad seemed to care for Xavier. So when Cain was sent to a boarding school, it made him hate more. Charles's father revisits all the memories of Cain bullying him for being a mutant, but Cain still refuses to forgive Charles. As Wolverine and Cyclops return with the ruby, Charles asks Cain to speak aloud the incantation that returns him to being the Juggernaut. Eugene turns normal, but this time he gets the girl. Juggernaut leaves the X-Mansion without harming anyone, and Xavier claims it's his way of saying thank you for saving his life.
Don't touch me! Stop the...
Nightcrawler. This episode introduces another iconic and personal favourite X-Men character, Nightcrawler. He is currently being misunderstood by the people of Bavaria, who consider him a demon. Wolverine, Gambit and Rogue are all in the vicinity looking for skiing opportunities in the Bavarian Alps. However, Wolverine gets interested in the prospect of hunting a demon, and the other two join him. Gambit's poor skiing leads to an avalanche, which leaves him deeply injured, but Rogue saves him and Wolverine. They are further rescued by the monks of a nearby monastery. Disaster strikes when one of the monks called Brother Reinhardt gets suspicious of the 3 guests. Someone tries to attack Gambit in his sleep, but Rogue stops him. As the person tries to escape, Rogue chases after him, and Rogue encounters Nightcrawler. He saves Rogue from falling, but Wolverine is not ready to listen to reason, which is his go-to stance. But the head of the monastery explains that Nightcrawler is a fellow monk. Nightcrawler introduces himself as Kurt Wagner. He claims to have been born with blue skin and abandoned by his mother. It is revealed to the audience that Mystique is Kurt's mother. This episode is again loosely based on Uncanny X-Men issues 154 to 155. Kurt was saved by the Wagner circus, where he performed, but he was still ostracized. It seemed to continue as the fanatical Brother Reinhardt rallies the townsfolk to burn down the church and finish off the devil inside. Wolverine doesn't seem to believe God cares for the mutants and questions Nightcrawler's belief, but still defends him against the angry mob. Rogue and Gambit also join in, but Gambit gets shot in the arm. Nightcrawler uses teleportation ability to save the monks who are attacked by the mob. However, Reinhardt sets fire to the church and tries to shoot Nightcrawler. But as Reinhardt is about to fall, Nightcrawler saves him. Reinhardt realizes his mistake, but the monastery is burnt down. The incident still helps Kurt to be accepted by the townsfolk. Wolverine, Rogue and Gambit return to Paris, where Rogue is surprised to find Wolverine praying with the Bible Nightcrawler gave him. Weapon X, Lies and Videotape. The episode begins with Wolverine fighting Saber-tooth in a cabin, where the native woman accompanies Wolverine. However, it's only a memory, and in reality, Professor X is probing through the mind. Wolverine wakes up and goes nuts as he hallucinates Saber-tooth. He runs away from the mansion, and when Jean goes through his stuff, he finds a picture of Wolverine with the native woman and a coordinate. Beast follows Wolverine and finds him entering the Weapon X facility. The abandoned lab and its equipment bring a flush of memories to Wolverine on how he escaped and what he encountered. Beast confronts Wolverine and manages to calm him down. However, it gets complicated when Saber-tooth turns up and the two fight each other. Wolverine remembers the time he spent with the native woman called Silver Fox. Another memory onslaught shows that Wolverine, Saber-tooth, Maverick and Silver Fox worked together at the Weapon X program. But while fighting Omega Red, Saber-tooth saved Wolverine and his own life, leaving Maverick and Silver Fox to die. It appears in the present that someone had lured in both Wolverine and Saber-tooth, and that someone is Silver Fox and Maverick. The plot is inspired by Wolverine, Volumes 2, issues 48 to 50, and issues 61 to 64. Silver Fox confesses that she's called them to find the source of the traumatic memories that haunt them, and as they go through the setup, Beast gets his hand on some recordings of the Professor. It shows that for the success of the Weapon X program, the 4 of them were imbued with false memories. The group comes across another room that can only be opened by the DNA print of Wolverine, Saber-tooth, Silver Fox, and Maverick. It releases a robot called Talos that is meant to recapture the Weapon X candidates for re-experimentation. The group decapitates Talos, but the robot's skull knocks out the Weapon X team, and another takes its place. Beast rescues them from the lab, and everyone goes their separate ways. Silver Fox denies her past relationship with Logan and leaves on a flying vehicle which bears the symbol of the Marvel supervillain Organization Hydra. Wolverine thanks Hank, but still feels confused about his past.
Of me.
Season 4, One Man's Worth, Part 1. In 2055, Forge is alerted to the temporal rift in the past and sends Bishop and his sister, Shard, into the past to rectify the situation. In 1995, Beast, Wolverine, Storm and Xavier seem to be enjoying a picnic when the temporal rift appeared. It changes the present into a war-torn world where the mutants are dressed in cyberpunk attire, and somehow Wolverine and Storm are married. This episode is loosely based on the Age of Apocalypse comic event, Sans Apocalypse. In this world, the mutants are at war with the humans because Professor X, the torchbearer of human-mutant harmony, has been erased from the timeline. In this timeline, the mutants follow a bulked-up Magneto as leader, while it appears superhumans are also fighting against mutants. The mutants include the likes of Mr. Sinister, whilst Iron Man, Patriot, Black Widow and others constitute the superhumans. Bishop and Shard appear amidst the war and meet Wolverine and Storm. They show a video footage of a mutant traitor called Fitzroy and Bantam who were recruited by Master Mold and sent to 1959 to kill Charles Xavier. They are further accompanied by the robot Nimrod, Thanks to Storm, the time-travelling siblings Wolverine joins them in travelling to 1959, where Charles is still a young researcher. The four of them take Charles to a bar and tell him about the X-Men as well as his role in the future, but Charles finds it a little hard to believe. As the bartender gets a little bit too racist and engages in a brawl with the mutants, Charles runs away. The time travellers escape the bar, but are ambushed by the Sentinel Nimrod. They manage to destroy it, but only temporarily. Shard notices Fitzroy and Bantam leaving Charles's lab, and although she runs after them, they escape into the future along with Nimrod. Meanwhile, Charles watches the fight, but as he opens the door of the lab, the detonator, set by Fitzroy, is triggered. One Man's Worth, Part 2. The detonator explodes and young Charles Xavier perishes. Bishop blames Wolverine for starting the bar fight, while the men from the bar arrive with pins and forks. Storm sweeps them away, and the four decide to travel back to the future to meet Forge. However, the future has changed, and the alternate future has Forge working for Master Mold. He looks scared, and as the time travelers switch on the time portal, robots called the Enforcers arrive. Forge and the Sentinel Enforcers are based on the Age of Apocalypse comic designs. Bishop, Shard, Wolverine and Storm destroy the Enforcers and ask Forge to repair the time portal that got damaged during the fight. Meanwhile, Fitzroy and Bantam inform Master Mold about their success, but Master Mold reminds them that the time travelers can still change the past and future. An alert on Forge working on the portal further alerts Master Mold, and he asks Fitzroy to finish off the time travelers. Master Mold asks Nimrod to stay back and gives him a different task, while Fitzroy and Bantam overhear Master Mold's plan to get rid of them once the job is done. Fitzroy and Bantam join Forge and the time travelers in fighting the Enforcers. He also gives them his own recording to stop his past self from blowing up Charles Xavier. Fitzroy is injured, and so is Shard, so Wolverine, Storm and Bishop travel to the past. They find Charles earlier and show him the footage to convince him. Storm also asks Xavier to read their mind to prove they're telling the truth. They are further ambushed by Nimrod, who appeared as Charles's friend Cindy, but Wolverine sniffed it out and Bishop destroyed it. When Fitzroy and Bantam arrive, they show Fitzroy's own recording to Fitzroy, and Fitzroy backs off, allowing Wolverine to throw away the explosives before they detonate. Fitzroy drains Xavier's energy to return to the future, while Bishop also uses his transceiver to return. Wolverine and Storm share a romantic goodbye as they deactivate their own transceivers, thereby ending the best romance in the X-Men saga. As they return to the original reality, Storm teases Wolverine for flirting, while Professor X shares a knowing smile, remembering the past. Courage. Morph has recovered after his rehabilitation at Muir Island and returns to the X-Mansion. He is given a warm welcome by Professor Xavier and Jean, who plan a surprise party. Morph seems to have also forgiven Cyclops and moved on, but the celebration is short-lived as the team gets an alert on a sudden robbery at Zydex Industries. The attack was made by Sentinels, who were sent by Master Mold's head to steal Zydex Industries' newest invention, plastic with an iron-like strength. Morph volunteers to join Wolverine in finding out what has happened in the factory. And although Wolverine gets a whiff of the Sentinels, he keeps it from Morph, fearing it will trigger some horrific memories. However, Morph comes across a Sentinel footprint which makes him panic, and he is disappointed with Wolverine for keeping it from him. Master Mold also reprograms his Sentinels to make them capture Trask and Garac, as well as Charles Xavier, who he blames for destroying his body. The Sentinels arrive at the mansion whilst Morph and Professor X are taking a stroll in the garden. Morph freezes up whilst confronting the Sentinels, but Beast and Wolverine arrive to combat the robots. However, one of the Sentinels manages to get away after kidnapping Xavier. Later, Beast uses the decapitated Sentinel head and finds the coordinates the Sentinels are headed for. This is where Trask and Garac are hiding in the middle of a jungle, arguing like an old married couple. They get attacked by the Sentinels, but the X-Men arrive to save the duo. However, even with the X-Men putting up a fight, a Sentinel still manages to kidnap the duo and take them to Master Mold's lair. The X-Men follow in Blackbird, while Morph also gets a different coordinate and decides to pursue it alone. Master Mold declares his plan to use Trask and Garac to work for him, as the rest of the Sentinels rebuild his body, whereas Mold plans to interrogate Professor Xavier's telepathic powers. The X-Men enter the cave to put a stop to the plan. They engage the Sentinels, while Morph also arrives to take on the Sentinels. Throughout this episode, Morph transforms into various mutant characters, and the final action sequence sees him become Strong Guy, Omega Red, Sasquatch, Angel, and Longshot. The X-Men get rid of Master Mold for good, but Morph realizes he still needs to get rid of his fears and leave for the time being to get a hold on things.
What's that? Leave him alone!
Proteus, Part 1. We are back at Muir Island, where a patient called Kevin breaks loose and possesses Banshee. Kevin is a young teenage boy who is unable to control his powers and transforms into a monstrous creature called Proteus. He has reality warping powers and also appears to be Moira McTaggart's son. As Proteus escapes, Moira desperately calls for Professor Xavier and his X-Men for help. Professor X remembers his past with Moira. As a young soldier, he had proposed to Moira, but after a few years, she broke off the engagement and got married to Joseph McTaggart. Charles also fell in love with a nurse called Amelia Vogt, but he chose the X-Men over her, leading to a divorce. All of those years later, Charles seemed to still care for Moira, and when he learns about Proteus, he immediately starts looking for him. Moira further shares about her mission to help mutants begin with Proteus. Meanwhile, Proteus wreaks havoc in Scotland, and the X-Men soon find him creating disturbances in a town. As a kid, Proteus seemed to be enjoying his first time outside. At Moira's behest, Charles tries to connect with Proteus physically, but it only drives him crazier. Proteus saves a boy from being bullied, and when the kid's father arrived, Proteus misses his own father and looks for him. In the comics, people possessed by Proteus die as the mutant energy burns their bodies. Proteus unleashes his rage on the locals, warping the buildings and roads of the town. Professor Xavier again tries to contact Proteus, but Proteus becomes agitated and blocks Professor Xavier from his mind. When the X-Men arrive in the town, Proteus possesses a man and tries to possess Professor, but Rogue touches him and is unable to control his powers. Proteus escapes, but Rogue realizes that he is looking for his father. The X-Men track Proteus and follow him. As Wolverine plans to take out Proteus, Moira calls Joseph to alert him about their son. However, Joseph is now a politician, and all he cares about is the elections. As the X-Men confront Proteus again, Moira finally reveals to Xavier that Kevin, aka Proteus, is her son. Proteus and the X-Men engage in another battle. As Proteus leaves to look for his father, he leaves the X-Men hurt and horrified.
To me, Kevin! Stop fighting us and I'll listen!
Proteus, Part 2. The close encounter with Proteus leaves Wolverine traumatized, while Xavier and the X-Men decide to comfort Joseph McTaggart. Proteus chooses to do the same himself and again possesses a man. Once more, he comes across the X-Men, Xavier and Moira. Moira tries to reason with him that Joseph wouldn't meet him, but Proteus doesn't heed her. He traps the X-Men in another warped reality to escape them. Xavier, Moira, and the X-Men meet Joseph, who refuses to meet his son, and even goes as far as asking Moira to tell Kevin that Xavier is his father. Since both Kevin and Charles have telepathic abilities, it is pretty plausible. Nevertheless, Xavier offers to provide Joseph protection, but Joseph refuses the offer. Meanwhile, Proteus possesses a security guard to enter Joseph's house to find out where he can find his father. On the other hand, Rogue keeps a close eye on Joseph. Proteus possesses one of Joseph's personal guards and publicly confronts him in a hall. However, Joseph gets afraid and runs away. The X-Men fight Proteus once again, averting the danger of his warped reality. Xavier again reaches out to Kevin but fails. In the comics, Proteus dies while facing Colossus, and his father dies with him. Later in the evening, Proteus confronts Joseph once again during a meeting in another hall. Moira and Banshee arrive with a machine that can control Proteus, but Proteus destroys it, and Xavier makes one last try. He asks Proteus to possess him, and in the astral plane, Xavier reaches out to Kevin, bringing him back to his human form. Joseph finally recognizes his son, and they reconcile. Later we find Banshee training Kevin to better control his power.
You renounce me! Return! You!
Sanctuary, Part 1. The episode begins with some kind of magnetic activity in space. Later, Magneto crashes a UN seating and informs the world leaders of his plans about mutant liberation. Magneto claims to have created a new place in a floating asteroid for mutants to live freely. He calls it Asteroid M and has created the place with the help of a bunch of missing scientists. As Magneto claims to free the mutants of Genosha, Xavier gets worried. With President Kelly warning him about the repercussions and the world pointing their guns at Magneto, it seems dangerous. Gambit likes Magneto's idea and joins Xavier and Beast to check out Asteroid M. The trio join Magneto when he visits Africa to take on some mutants on Asteroid M. However, Xavier notices that Magneto seems weak. David Hemblen, the voice of Magneto, was offered to play the role in the X-Men live-action movie, but a schedule conflict led to Hemblen turning down the role, while Sir Ian McKellen turned the iconic role all the more legendary. At Genosha, Magneto and his followers face resistance from the military, who even use Sentinels to fight the mutants. A group of Magneto fans called the Acolytes, led by Fabian Cortez, further aids in fighting for the Sentinels. Gambit also joins the fight, and finally they set off for Asteroid M. On board Asteroid M, Xavier also meets his ex, Amala Vogt. She still seems to despise Xavier's philosophy and blames him for bringing out the mutants from their safe bubble. As human missiles approach Asteroid M for attacks, Cortez asks Magneto to wipe them out. However, Magneto destroys the missiles and behaves more diplomatically in managing the situation. It turns out the missiles were sent in retaliation for someone releasing a warhead from Asteroid M. On the other hand, Beast tells Gambit about Amelia and how Amelia and Charles came to be in a relationship, as well as why Amelia left Charles. Cortez meets Magneto in his chamber, and Magneto claims to know it was Cortez who launched the warhead. Cortez questions Magneto's approach and attacks him, weakening him. He ejects Magneto into space with an escape pod. The X-Men and Xavier approach the halls at the sound of Cortez's crying, but he falsely blames the X-Men for destroying Magneto.
I will have my vengeance!
Sanctuary Part 2. As the mutants aboard Asteroid M turn against Xavier and the X-Men, Gambit gets himself captured, allowing Professor X and Beast to escape with the human astronauts. On their way, Xavier watches the escape pod with Magneto shoot past them, and he could feel Magneto ceasing to exist. Once they land, Rogue desperately looks for Gambit and is heartbroken to hear that he's been captured. Charles Xavier sets up a short and private funeral for Magneto. The scene reveals Magneto's real name, Eric Magnus Lenshair. Meanwhile, in Asteroid M, Fabian assumes leadership and tortures Gambit. He sends a message to all leaders ordering the release of all mutants enslaved or detained. However, Fabian's extreme methods make Amelia doubtful. Professor X also speaks to President Kelly about the threat posed by Fabian Cortez. Xavier decides to take his team to Asteroid M to stop Fabian. Back at Asteroid M, Amelia consults Gambit, who asks her to look for recordings about how Magneto was destroyed. By the way, this two-parter segment is loosely based on the Mutant Genesis plot from X-Men Volume 2 and issues 1 to 3. Professor X and the X-Men dress up in Shi'ar tech suits as well as use Shi'ar tech to clothe the Blackbird as it approaches Asteroid M. At the same time, Amelia finds video evidence against Fabian. Back on Earth, the escape pod crashes into the desert, and the Earth's magnetic field resurrects Magneto. However, it gets a little too complicated at Asteroid M as Wolverine and Rogue ambush Fabian and the Acolytes. The Acolytes are never called due to broadcasting standards. They are captured, but Amelia reveals the truth about Fabian throwing Magneto out. Fabian escapes them and fires the missile towards Earth. Thankfully, Beast has defused some of them. The day is, however, saved by Magneto, who appears in space and destroys the missiles as well as taking down Fabian. As Magneto destroys Asteroid M, the X-Men escape with Amelia and a few others. Amelia still refuses to get back together, but leaves Xavier on better terms. On the other hand, Fabian is rescued by Apocalypse and his new ally, Lilandra's sister, Deathbird.
You get in here. Where's Jean?
Get her out of here!
Beyond Good and Evil, Part 1, The End of Time. In the year 3999, Cable, his now grown-up son Tyler, the other mutants find one of Apocalypse's lairs in Cairo. However, Apocalypse manages to steal Cable's time device during the confrontation and escapes into time. The story now shifts to 1950. Bishop says goodbye to Wolverine and Storm after saving a young Charles from being murdered. He travels through time, but some sort of disturbance stops him from reaching Forge and Shard. Instead, Bishop is taken to the Axis of Time. Thanks to Apocalypse entering the time stream, Bishop encounters an insane midget calling himself the Bender. He shows Bishop what's going on in the present in the lives of the X-Men. It is Jean and Cyclops' second and real wedding. Everything goes well until the couple tries to leave the chapel when they are ambushed by the Nasty Boys. The Nasty Boys knock out the newlyweds, and despite the X-Men clamoring to save them, the Nasty Boys and Vertigo get away with the newlyweds. However, their main goal is to kidnap Jean Grey, and they take her to the Axis of Time. According to X-Men 97 showrunner Bo DeMaio, it is during the events of this episode that Jean Grey was replaced by her exact clone, Madeline Pryor. However, we would consider her Jean for the rest of the series. Meanwhile, Mr. Sinister attacks the X Mansion and Jubilee as he attempts to kidnap Professor X, but Shard arrives looking for a brother and tries to stop Sinister. After finding Scott, the rest of the X-Men also return to the mansion and try to stop Sinister, who calls the Nasty Boys to open the time portal. They appear, but the X-Men fight back, forcing the Nasty Boys to escape without him. However, the portal opens once again and Sinister escapes, but Rogue saves Xavier. At Castle Limbo in the Axis of Time, a captive Jean finds out that Sinister is now working for Apocalypse.
Still a thief. No knife in the back this time.
Beyond Good and Evil, Part 2, Promise of Apocalypse. At the Shi'ar Imperial Palace, Deathbird tries to attack Lilandra and usurp the throne. Gladiator stops her, and Apocalypse appears through a time portal. However, instead of killing Lilandra as he'd promised, Apocalypse leaves with Oracle and the Imperial Guard. Xavier tries to console a distraught Cyclops when he receives news from Lilandra about what has transpired at Shi'ar. Xavier realizes Sinister and Apocalypse are working together, snatching psychics like different flavored candy bars. He sends a team of X-Men to save the rest of the psychics. And this brings us to another iconic mutant, Psylocke. She breaks into Worthington Castle in England, but Archangel catches her. He wears a different costume and seems calmer since we last seen him. Archangel gets a little flirty with Psylocke, but she knocks him out and escapes with his car while Archangel follows her. Meanwhile, at Castle Limbo, Apocalypse explains the Axis of Time to Jean and promises her that she will be stuck there forever. Interestingly, this 4-part segment was supposed to be the concluding chapter of the series, but the insane popularity demanded the extension of Season 4 and a Season 5. In London, Shard and Wolverine keep an eye on Psylocke when they notice Worthington III. Archangel confronts Psylocke as she unloads the items she stole, but they are interrupted by Mystique and Saber-tooth, while Wolverine and Shard also enter the fray. The brother that Psylocke seems to be stealing for is Marvel superhero Captain Britain. The fighting ceases when Magneto appears and tries to kidnap Psylocke. Magneto working for Apocalypse doesn't make sense, but it's revealed that Apocalypse has promised to resurrect Magneto's wife. Wolverine tries to stop Magneto, but he escapes with the Psychic, leaving Wolverine tied up. Mystique also escapes without Saber-tooth, and Storm arrives with Gambit to help them out. However, at Castle Limbo, Sinister brings back another Psychic telepath, as Storm and Gambit had left unexplainably. In the future, Cable and Tyler find a time machine they can steal.
Oh, Apocalypse.
Beyond Good and Evil, Part 3, The Lazarus Chamber. At the Axis of Time, Bender shows Bishop the future, where Cable, Tyler, and the others attempt to obtain a time machine. This episode goes heavy on the action as Cable and his group fight robots to attend the Grey Malkian time machine. Cable plans to destroy Apocalypse's recharging station, the Lazarus Chamber, as he fears that with the time-travelling ability, Apocalypse can now go back and recharge any time. However, instead of travelling back into the past, he travels into the present, at the X Mansion. This is something that seems to be orchestrated by Apocalypse himself. Cable is least bothered about the kidnapped psychics and the other villains that have joined Apocalypse. On the other hand, Beast develops a theory of what might have happened to Bishop. Cyclops tries to interrogate Saber-tooth, but Wolverine tries his own way and gets better results. Meanwhile, Cable tells the rest about Apocalypse's hibernation chapter. The X-Men and Xavier decide to travel to the past to destroy the Lazarus Chamber, while Xavier finds out that Apocalypse wants to master time. Xavier further asks Shard to stay back with Rogue and Jubilee, in case she is the only one to help Bishop, while Archangel promises to let go of his vengeance and join the team. Before we move on, we would like to share that this is our own favourite multi-part episode in the series so far. It's cinematic and tells a more poignant story that truly reflects Marvel's marvellous nature. As a team arrive in ancient Egypt in 1200 BC, they encounter the 4 horsemen protecting the pyramid with the Lazarus Chamber. After averting a set of booby traps and a fight with the 4 horsemen, they manage to enter the chamber, but Cable gets injured and left behind in the corridors to recover. They are duped as instead of Apocalypse, Mystique appears in his place, while the real Apocalypse activates a machine which knocks out all the X-Men, and Apocalypse succeeds the most powerful psychic of all time, Professor Xavier.
Learner.
Beyond Good and Evil, Part 4, End and Beginning. Picking up from the past episode, Cable and the X-Men demolish Apocalypse's pyramid, while Beast deduces they can use Grey Malkin and Cerebro to find Professor Charles Xavier. Cerebro tracks Professor X at the Nexus of Time, and Cable just leaves with Grey Malkin. Meanwhile, at Castle Limbo, Apocalypse has collected all psychics, Rachel Summers, Mastermind and Moondragon, as well as one angry Wolverine. Apocalypse now enacts his plans as he releases all the psychics into the Axis of Time to use their energy in manipulating it. When Magneto asks Apocalypse what he plans to do next, Apocalypse explains that he wants to erase time and create everything in his own image. Magneto realizes this is not what he signed up for and attacks Apocalypse. Magneto is further joined by Mystique posing as Death. They throw Apocalypse into the time void, but the real Horsemen save him. Magneto and Mystique tell Sinister about Apocalypse's plan, but Sinister claims to be already aware of it and has agreed to it. Magneto rushes to free Wolverine to join the fight, while Cable turns up at the castle. Interestingly, the sound effect used for Magneto's powers is the same as the one used for the Klingon cloaking device in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, 1984. Meanwhile, time starts to get deleted, and humans, mutants, as well as aliens cease to exist. Bishop questions Bender about what's going on, and he slips out the information that Apocalypse is messing with time. As Bishop tries shooting at Bender, he accidentally frees Psylocke, which starts restoring time and the people. Wolverine defeats Sinister, and Cable shoots the crystal used to control the psychics. Sinister escapes through a time portal with the Nasty Boys, while Cable also destroys Castle Limbo. It is now time for the final showdown as Magneto, Wolverine, Mystique, Cable, and Bishop fight Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen. Apocalypse still seems to win, but with all the psychics free, they unify their power and lock Apocalypse in the end of time. The heroes and survivors take Grey Malkin to return to the present. As everyone leaves, Bender is revealed as Immortus, the time-manipulating villain, to the Avengers. Bishop reunites with Shard while Cyclops and Jean share a kiss. Magneto also seems to have learned his mistake, but Cable leaves with the machine to return to his son.
I hereby extend an invitation to all X-Men to join us for Christmas dinner.
Have yourself a Morlock Little Xmas. It's a Christmas episode, and the holiday cheer has reached the X Mansion. Cyclops, Rogue, and Jubilee decorate the Christmas tree singing, whilst Jean and Gambit are on the verge of fighting over Christmas dinner. Beast is also at it, experimenting with a new glaze, and the only one who is not ready to have good fun is good old grumpy Logan. Aurora, aka Storm, fears a crisis might befall them, and it does when Beast's culinary experiment blows up in his face. But a real crisis awaits. Jubilee convinces Storm and Wolverine to join her for Christmas shopping, when they notice the Morlocks running away with an ambulance. Wolverine and Storm stop them, and they reveal that Leech is sick. Storm stops the cops from following them and heads to the underground tunnels to take a look at Leech. It appears Storm has been really neglecting her duties as the leader of the Morlocks, but she quickly takes up the responsibility and asks Wolverine to shift Leech to the mansion for Beast to treat him. However, Wolverine realizes Leech doesn't have much time. Although there's a chance that Wolverine's blood and its healing properties can save the little Morlock, he fears it might be a failure. As Wolverine refuses the blood transfusion, Jubilee and Storm insist that it's necessary to take the risk. The episode introduces an original character called Mariana. She is a little Morlock and seems to be based on Namor the Submariner's wife, Marina Smallwood. Moving on, Wolverine agrees to the transfusion and Storm calls Rogue to bring over Beast. The blood transfusion works and Leech quickly recovers. However, watching the Morlocks enjoy a quiet and cheap dinner moves Jubilee, and she decides to share the food and gifts she bought with the rest of them. She calls Professor X and informs them they will be late for dinner.
You are only yourself, no one else.
Lotus and the Steel. Wolverine is in therapy with Professor X and shares that he has attacked a young guy for speeding past him, and even hurt Jubilee. When Professor X is unable to find the source of his troubles, Wolverine decides to quit the X-Men and visit his friends in Japan. Jubilee tries to stop Wolverine, but he leaves anyway. In a remote and peaceful Japanese village, Logan meets his former spiritual teacher, Oku. Wolverine helps monk Oku in building the temple and spends time meditating. However, trouble seems to follow him as he learns that the neighbouring village will be attacked by a group of bandits. The Silver Samurai, a mysterious fellow, further warns Wolverine not to interfere, and a disinterested Wolverine barely oblige. Meanwhile, Jubilee writes a letter to Professor Xavier and leaves for Japan. The bandits arrive at the village and give the villagers 3 days to pay the Silver Samurai. A young man called Soichi refuses to pay the tribute and confronts the bandits, but he is subdued by the bandit and the Silver Samurai suddenly appears, doubling the payment sum, offering only 2 days for it. However, it is not revealed that the Silver Samurai is a mutant criminal called Kenoichi Harada. Wolverine soon finds out what has happened when he rescues Master Oku from the burning temple. Soichi's sister, Kisara, informs Wolverine about the protection racket and later how Soichi is assembling the villagers to fight. Wolverine again finds himself at a crossroads, but a little inspiration from Kisara, as well as Master Oku's guidance, finally helps him see the truth. In the meantime, Jubilee arrives in the village and starts looking for Wolverine. The next day, Wolverine joins Soichi and the rest of the villagers, setting up traps to fight the gangsters. Nightmares of his past still torment Wolverine in his sleep, but he joins the villagers in their fight. It is finally when the bandits are about to shoot Master Oku that Wolverine jumps into the fight. Elsewhere, Jubilee joins Kisara and others to help the villagers. The bandits are defeated, but the Silver Samurai appears, and this time Wolverine takes him down. The Silver Samurai retreats, while Wolverine bids goodbye to everyone before he leaves with Jubilee. Love in vain. As Scott and Jean leave for a personal trip, Rogue ruminates on her inability to have similar romantic life. Elsewhere in the desert, Wolverine witnesses a giant alien fish land on Earth, while reptilian aliens with tentacles exit it. Wolverine fights the aliens, but is zapped by them and is taken inside the alien fish. Meanwhile, Rogue gets a call from her old boyfriend, Cody, whom she has rendered comatose after kissing him. Cody claims to love Rogue and even kisses her to show that Rogue's powers don't affect him anymore, while the Brood secretly infects them. Rogue's carnal desire might be overwhelming as she doesn't seem to suspect Cody and decides to take a trip with him. On the other hand, Wolverine wakes up while inside the alien fish and manages to escape. He calls Professor X for help, while Rogue refuses to help with rescuing Wolverine and leaves with Cody for a vacation. It is revealed that the Brood Queen has studied the X-Men and wants them to be part of the Brood colony. However, she is especially interested in Rogue. The Brood in the comic are quite different and were redesigned for the series to make them more animator-friendly. They also laid eggs inside their victims to transform them instead of infecting victims with spores. Rogue soon realizes that she has been betrayed as Cody brings her to the desert and she witnesses the Brood attacking her friends. Wolverine soon turns into an alienoid and runs away, while Storm, Gambit and Beast are captured. However, Wolverine's healing powers help him turn back into a human. Meanwhile, Cody turns into an alienoid and takes Rogue inside the fish. As Rogue turns into a Brood, the Brood Queen informs that he was selected as a host body to give birth to Brood babies. Wolverine finally arrives and lets Rogue zap him, which helps her heal. As Wolverine and Rogue rescue their friends, Storm sends a message to Professor X, who finds out that the giant fish is another alien called Akanti, which was abducted and used as a ship by the Brood. Professor Xavier uses telepathy to free the Akanti from the Brood. Akanti returns the X-Men to Earth and leaves, while Cody remains with the Brood.
The time has come for justice!
Secrets, not long buried. This story focuses on Cyclops, who leaves the X-Mansion to go and meet an old friend called Dr. Taylor Prescott. Cyclops remembers Dr. Prescott helping mutant children and protecting them from bullies in the orphanage. To honor him, Cyclops carries a crystal memento of Dr. Prescott with mutant children. However, Cyclops' plane gets shot down by a mutant called Watchdog in the middle of the desert, and Cyclops finds himself without his powers. He hitchhikes a ride from Daryl Tanaka, who takes Cyclops to a near town called Skull Mesa. Tanaka examines Cyclops' eyes as a doctor, but is unable to tell him anything about Prescott. The town appears unusual as it consists only of mutants, but they are afraid of strangers. The reason becomes pretty clear when the anti-human mutant group called Children of Shadow meets Scott. It is led by Billy Braddock, Solar, Toad, and Chet Lambert. Toad and Solar are Marvel comic characters, although Solar's name is Silas King in the comics. Solar tries to make Cyclops leave, but he won't without finding Prescott. The Children of Shadow send Cyclops to an abandoned house, so Cyclops returns to Tanaka and asks for help. As Tanaka refuses, Solar and his team take Cyclops to meet Prescott, who was captured and restrained by Toad's slime in an underground cave. Solar reveals that he's using mutants of the town to mine for diamonds. They release Cyclops, but he tries recruiting mutants from the town to overthrow Solar. Everybody refuses, and the next day Solar captures Cyclops again and takes him to the town centre to make an example of him. However, this time a mutant called Tusk decides to revolt and help Cyclops. Although the Children of Shadow attack Tusk, he is followed by other mutants who rise to defy Solar's team and help out Cyclops. Tanaka uses his healing powers to restore Cyclops' powers. Cyclops and the mutants succeed in defeating Solar and reclaim the town that was built and managed by Prescott. He also shares a warm reunion with the Doctor, and they walk off into the sunset.
Focus all your powers!
No!
Xavier remembers. Xavier's fears suddenly come true as he tosses and turns in his sleep. He watches Jubilee get captured by Sentinels, Saber-tooth attacking Wolverine, space closing in on Storm, and Sinister kidnapping the Summers. However, it's all a big bad dream, and in reality Beast, Jean and Cyclops are looking after Xavier in the infirmary. Jean claims that his condition is caused by concussion, but Cyclops insists that Jean reach out to him and find out what happened. Beast further notes that Xavier's vitals are falling without any ailment, and if nothing is done soon, he may be lost forever. Back inside Xavier's head, he finds himself in a paradise where his mother is alive and all the X-Men are out of danger, relaxing by the pool. However, Xavier realizes it's too good to be true, but barely has any hold on reality. A voice further calls out to Xavier in the astral plane, and Xavier finds himself following it. Meanwhile, Jean again delves into Xavier's mind to find out where he is. As Jean calls out to Xavier, he tries to recognize the other voice. He remembers little Aurora Monroe stealing his wallet. As Xavier follows her, he encounters another psychic. This man is revealed to be Aurora's employer, the Shadow King. Xavier pulls Shadow King from the memory to the astral plane, as he remembers defeating the Shadow King 20 years ago. Xavier reveals that his encounter with the Shadow King which prompted him to form the X-Men. The X-Men in Xavier's memory wear the costumes from their look from the original comics. However, the distinctive look of the characters in the series is based on the designs of Jim Lee. Nonetheless, the Shadow King traps Xavier in a prison and returns to his body. This manifests Xavier's phobias into reality as Wolverine fights Saber-tooth, while walls close in on Storm and Jubilee gets captured by Sentinels. With the Shadow King distracted, the trapped heroes wake up, and now it rests up to Jean. She frees Professor X from the astral plane prison, and together they fight back against the Shadow King. As the Shadow King is sealed back in the astral plane, Jean and Xavier return to reality. Family ties. Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch of the Avengers team, calls her brother Pietro Maximoff, aka Quicksilver of the X Factor, to inform him of their sick father. However, the dying man informs that the twins are not his biological children, and a midwife called Bova brought them to him and his wife. Elsewhere, Magneto trespasses in the X Mansion and informs Charles that he has obtained news that his wife Magda is alive. Magneto suspects it might be a trap and asks Charles to use Cerebro to check for trouble. However, Xavier sends Wolverine to spy on Magneto, and Wolverine gets too happy about it. As for the twins, they arrive at Wundagore, where the High Evolutionary stops the twins from entering. He undertakes a quick DNA test and confirms that they are really the twins that Lady Bova gave the couple. High Evolutionary and Bova inform that Magda ran away pregnant while Magneto destroyed a nearby village, and later Magna perished in the cold. The twins decide to take revenge and appear at the cemetery where Magneto arrives to visit the gravestone of his wife. Wolverine witnesses everything as a human beast traps Magneto by using Magda's voice. However, the twins are also restrained along with Magneto as the High Evolutionary unveils his scheme. Wolverine attacks the High Evolutionary and his human beasts, but he's knocked out by a gas. High Evolutionary reveals that Magneto is actually the father of the twins, and he intends to use the family's DNA to create a superior race of new men. To prove his point, the High Evolutionary turns Wolverine into a werewolf. As Professor X and Beast arrive at Wundagore, the High Evolutionary instructs his human beast-like new men to get Beast. Magneto manages to free himself as well as his kids, and after a brief fight, the High Evolutionary escapes with his new men. This returns the Valley and Wolverine to normal. The twins refuse to forgive Magneto, but he hopes to make it up to them one day.
It is the Spire!
Season 5, Failank Covenant, Part 1. When Saber-tooth goes on his usual rampage, Beast and Jubilee capture him, but Professor Xavier asks them to keep it from Wolverine. However, Wolverine learns the truth anyway and confronts Saber-tooth, only to realize it's not him, but an alien creature. The alien had already learned everything about the mansion and started integrating with every object. Professor X gets an unexpected call from Mr. Sinister, who tries to warn him about the creature, but it captures all the mutants in the mansion except for Beast, who escapes. However, a similar alien has been waiting in the car and introduced to himself as Warlock. Warlock helps Beast evade the alien that is called Phalanx. Warlock reveals that he is a peaceful Phalanx who did not want to be assimilated, so he left the Phalanx planet with his life mate. The Phalanx caught up to them, and the ship crashed on Earth. While Warlock escaped, his life mate got assimilated by the Phalanx. The fifth and final season uses a new opening sequence that combines the original sequence with clips from the episodes, while the iconic theme song is slightly altered. Beast and Warlock visit the Eye Hospital, from where Beast contacts President Kelly, but Warlock notes that Kelly is already assimilated by the Phalanx. Beast then contacts Forge on a secret line and meets with Forge and Quicksilver in a restaurant. Warlock shows them how he can assimilate living and non-living things, when Phalanx again attacks them. As they try to escape, Quicksilver falls prey to Phalanx, while the Phalanx takes away Forge's cybernetic leg. However, unlikely help arrives as Sinister comes to their rescue and takes them away in his jet. But a greater threat awaits as they find out that the Phalanx has transformed the Empire State Building into a spire that calls for the Phalanx Empire to arrive on Earth. Failank Covenant, Part 2. Beast decides to take the help of Moira and arrives at Muir Island, where they discover Amelia again working as a nurse. Two of Xavier's exes working together. Now that's a first. Anyway, the team finds out the Phalanx can assimilate non-living items and humans, but not mutants. So they develop a virus that's capable of vanquishing the Phalanx. Meanwhile, at the Empire State Building, Cameron Hodge reveals himself to be part of the Phalanx. He tells Wolverine that his adamantium bones could be a useful conductor, and his healing abilities can help the Phalanx to find a way to assimilate the mutants. The Phalanx reaches Muir Island, and while Banshee and Moira get taken by the Phalanx, the rest of them flee in Moira's jet. Amelia takes the group to Magneto, who's become a recluse and has grown a beard after what life has thrown at him. At first he refuses to be of help, but then the news of Quicksilver makes him change his mind. Warlock masks Magneto's organic nature as he collects a Phalanx sample from the Phalanx outpost. As they bring it back to the ship, the sample transforms into Hodge's head and informs the group about the Phalanx's plan to assimilate Earth. The group administer the virus to Hodge, and it turns back into concrete, proving the virus works. Before we move on, let me tell you that this immensely popular series has inspired several spin-off video games, including X-Men, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, X-Men vs Street Fighter, X-Men 2 Clone Wars, and the X-Men vs Capcom series. At the Spire, the Phalanx begins assimilating the mutants and hopes to start with Professor X, but the survivors attack the building. Amelia, Forge, and Sinister rescue Jean, Lorna, and Cyclops. Of course, Cyclops misunderstands Sinister at first, but they are able to keep the Phalanx distracted. Magneto, Warlock, and Beast arrive next, and as Warlock is captured, he administers the virus, which returns every human, object, mutant, and building to normal. Warlock looks for Life Mate and finds her parts. He resurrects her and reunites. While Sinister gets away, the rest get together, and Warlock thanks his friends for all the help they gave him. He decides to return home with his life mate and fulfill his destiny, whilst Magneto also reunites with his son. A deal with the devil. Somewhere in the former Soviet Union, American scientists dig up Omega Red and thaw him. The US Navy colonel asked Omega Red to help in a mission of retrieving a sunken, unstable nuclear submarine off the coast of Hawaii in return for turning Omega Red into a human. Omega Red agrees, but asks for Wolverine and Storm to join him. Of course, he has plans for vengeance, and the duo reluctantly join the mission. Storm somehow manages to control Wolverine's temper, and everything goes well until Omega Red takes hold of the submarine and brings it online. Interestingly, the ship and its rescue attempt are a very real event, once a similar Soviet submarine went missing in Hawaii in 1968. Wolverine's worst fears become a reality when Omega Red removes the lethal implant that was put on him and turns on the X-Man and the US government. He plans to fire nuclear weapons at different cities across the world, but Storm asks Wolverine not to attack, as a small tear in their hazmat suits could expose them to radiation. Wolverine acts rather selfishly as he still attacks, but Omega Red captures them both, rendering the attack futile. However, Professor X is ready with a contingency plan. He sends Rogue and Beast on the Blackbird to drop charges in the ocean and stop the sub from reaching a launch depth. The US Navy is flabbergasted when it's unable to detect the Blackbird. The depth charge enables Storm and Wolverine to escape, but Omega Red has launched the missiles over Hawaii. Beast blows up some of the missiles, while the rest are taken care of by US F-18s. Rogue further jumps into the ocean and damages the submarine so Omega cannot navigate it anywhere. As she rescues the mini-submarine with Wolverine and Storm, Omega Red finds himself sinking into the ocean's depth with the Soviet nuclear submarine. The X-Men return to the mansion, but Wolverine still senses Omega Red lurking in deep sea water. No Mutant is an island. This episode was supposed to air as part of Season 3, but problems with animation delayed it. Before we begin, this is the episode that explains Jean's return before the Dark Phoenix saga. Anyway, Cyclops and the X-Men are in bad shape after Jean left, and Scott decides to leave the X-Men. He arrives at McNeil Orphanage, where Scott lived in his childhood and not-so-fond memories circulate in his mind. Scott finds that Sarah, an old friend from the orphanage, now runs the organisation. Sarah informs that a local called Zebediah Kilgrave donated and kept the orphanage afloat. He has also adopted 5 mutant kids. However, when there is a sudden fire in the building, Scott extinguishes it with his own power and encounters a mutant boy called Rusty. Scott shows Rusty his own mutant powers and Rusty confesses he doesn't want to go back to Kilgrave's. Rusty suspects that Kilgrave has a torture chamber in his basement as well as plans to overthrow the governor. Scott shares this with Sarah, who refuses to believe it and sends Rusty back to Kilgrave. However, Rusty was right, and Kilgrave uses his own mutant powers to compel the kids into doing his bidding. He uses the kid to break into the governor's office and threaten him. When Sarah and Scott learn the news about the governor resigning and Kilgrave's energy plant, they realise Rusty was right. Scott arrives at Kilgrave's place just as he finishes concealing his purple skin. Kilgrave invites Scott inside but compels the kid to hurt Scott. An unconscious Scott is dumped into the pool, but Sarah saves him. At the same time, unconscious Scott hallucinates Sarah as Jean. The duo find the kids in the basement and free them. Sarah also reveals to Scott that she knew about him being a mutant and still cared for him during their orphanage days. Kilgrave returns in a helicopter to attack the orphanage, while the news people arrive and shoot Kilgrave as he turns purple. In the comics, Kilgrave is also known as the Purple Man. Kilgrave compels Rusty to set the orphanage on fire, and although Cyclops is able to save all the kids as well as defeat Kilgrave, the orphanage is burnt down. Cyclops returns to Xavier's Institute only to learn that Jean is alive and well.
I'll handle her. You get Jubilee.
Longshot. Honestly, Mojo episodes don't top our list of favourite episodes, so let's just breeze through them. It begins with Wolverine trying to teach Jubilee how to drive, but as he takes a break and leaves momentarily, a portal opens up and Longshot drops into the shotgun seat. Mojo's henchmen and Spiral appear to recapture Longshot, but the rebel draws away Jubilee. Wolverine goes looking for Jubilee and helps them fight, forcing Spiral and the henchmen to leave. Mojo doesn't appreciate the news and sucks in her life force, but Major Domo suggests that Mojo can have Longshot fighting the X-Men in a quest to earn ratings. Mojo gladly accepts the idea and asks Spiral to get on with it. Meanwhile, in the X-Men dimension, Wolverine and a smitten Jubilee bring Longshot to the mansion. Professor X takes Longshot's approval in probing his mind, since he can't remember anything. The probe reveals that Longshot led the rebellion against Mojo, but Mojo captured him and erased his memories to get back to the rebels. Longshot's comrades rescued him, but Spiral chasing him was somehow brought to the Earth dimension. Like the previous one, this episode was also supposed to be part of Season 3. On the other hand, Jubilee gets abducted by Mojo and the X-Men find out. Mojo's arrival in this dimension has started to take its effects, and now it rests up to the X-Men and Longshot to rescue Jubilee, who is used as bait. A brief fight ensues between Mojo's robotic warriors and Beast, Rogue, Wolverine and Longshot. Mojo even releases dinosaur-like creatures to make it interesting. However, rating drops when the X-Men are able to destroy Mojo's ship. Rogue further breaks through the ship and rescues Jubilee. Mojo and his minions leave, while Longshot also bids farewell and leaves through the same portal.
For eliminating unwanted relatives.
Bloodlines. Graydon Creed returns to the Friends of Humanity, but they are not ready to accept him, especially since there is more than Saber-tooth spoiling his genetics. However, Creed promises to get all the mutants related to his bloodline, just to get back his position at Friends of Humanity. Sometime later, Nightcrawler turns up at the X-Mansion during Halloween and seeks the X-Men's help in rescuing his mother, who is supposed to be in danger. Wolverine, Rogue and Jubilee volunteer to help Nightcrawler, and together they discover that she's been captured by the Friends of Humanity. The group enters their new headquarters, and while Jubilee and Wolverine go to distract any more guards, Rogue joins Nightcrawler to look for Mum. It's obviously a shocking surprise when Mystique is revealed to be Mummy. However, Mystique claims the Friends of Humanity only wanted Nightcrawler. To add to the twist, Mystique is also revealed to be Graydon Creed's biological mother, and apparently Mystique made a deal with him to get Nightcrawler in her place. According to comic book resources, this is the second most tear-jerking episode of the series, and although we do not share the same sentiments, it definitely tells a good story. A bit soap opera-ish, to quote Jubilee. Creed releases a smoke to kill all three, but Wolverine and Jubilee break in and Nightcrawler fights Creed to save Mummy. Mystique escapes on her own while the X-Men help Nightcrawler out of the building. However, Nightcrawler goes after Mystique while the X-Men fight the Friends of Humanity soldiers. Nightcrawler confronts Mystique, who reveals that she's pretended to be a rich young woman to marry an Austrian count. But when she gave birth to Kurt, aka Nightcrawler, she was rejected by the community and Mystique abandoned the baby. Kurt is ready to forgive Mystique, who makes her sorrowful. Meanwhile, the X-Men take down the soldiers and their helicopters, but Creed rises to shoot at Nightcrawler. Mystique saves him and gets injured by the bullet. She pretends to sacrifice her life, while Nightcrawler escapes. But the dam Creed blew up, drowning Creed with his helicopter. Nightcrawler and Rogues fail to find Mystique, who escapes secretly, and they are still feeling guilty. The Friends of Humanity rescue Creed but throw him in front of Saber-tooth's house as Saber-tooth proceeds to take his revenge. Stormfront, Part 1. When an inexplicable storm affects New York, X-Men Storm is bugged out. She senses something is very wrong and jumps off the Blackbird to find out what's making it. The others, including Jubilee, Cyclops, Beast and Wolverine follow, but lose contact with Storm. As Storm tries to manage the erratic Storm, a man secretly watches her. When Storm falls, he rescues her and introduces himself as Archon from the planet Polemarchus. Archon informs that his planet is in dire need of help and forcefully takes Storm away to his planet. However, Storm manages to leave her communicator and a golden orb from Archon's suit as a clue for the X-Men. Storm finds that Polemarchus is affected by similar inexplicable weather events caused by a transmitter device that Archon argues keeps the planet stable and protects it like an atmosphere. On a different note, you can still find the episodes in the order they were meant to be on Disney+, which might clear up any confusion you had whilst watching as a kid. The X-Men find the clues left by Storm and examine them in the lab. Wolverine and Jubilee get impatient, and as they throw the golden orb, it opens a portal. The X-Men leave to find Storm and land in Polemarchus. Archon encourages Storm to manage the weather and save the planet, while the rest of the X-Men get attacked by the mob who blame them for the weather. However, as Polemarchian robots attack them, the mob runs away. Storm returns the planet to normal, but concentrates on keeping it in control, while the X-Men defeat the robots and enter Archon's palace to find Storm. But as Jubilee distracts Storm, the bad weather begins. Archon tries to stop the X-Men and Storm explains what has happened. As she finally manages to overcome environmental disasters, the planet's citizens rejoice and hail her. Archon expresses his gratitude and proposes to Storm, who says yes, much to the X-Men's shock.
Wolverine, wait!
Stormfront, Part 2. The second segment begins with Storm and Archon's wedding preparations. Wolverine is not happy with the decision and Beast argues that it's too soon. However, Storm is smitten and asks her friends to understand her feelings. Yet something seems extremely fishy. The workers on the planet are scared to death of Storm and Jubilee as well as the robots. It turns out Archon is not at all what he seemed to be. He is a ruthless conqueror who uses the central transmitter to power the robots and keeps the slaves in control. Archon sends a ship to get more slaves from the neighbouring planet of Bulgaria, while the rest of X-Men spy on the robots and workers of the planet. When they witness a Polemarchian ship return with the slaves, the X-Men attack the robots and get help from one of the Bulgarian slaves. By the way, this is the last episode animated by ACOM and has the original art style. The last 6 episodes were produced by the Philippine animation studio, but the change in style was drastic. The slaves take the X-Men to their hideout and explain everything. Meanwhile, Storm questions Archon, but he claims not to be so harsh with his servants. As the X-Men and the rebels destroy Archon's ships, he orders his men to get rid of the X-Men. However, the X-Men turn up during the gala dinner and reveal everything to Storm. As Archon shows his true colours, Storm gets mad and starts bringing down the planet. Jubilee reaches out to Storm and asks her to calm down as it will hurt innocent people. Storm is heartbroken, but she realises that she can't hurt people. Storm leaves a devastated Archon to return to Earth and destroys the central transmitter, allowing the captives to escape.
Stronger.
That's just what I had in mind. Oh.
Jubilee's Fairytale Theatre. When Jubilee leads a group of children through a cave system underneath the X mansion, they suddenly face a cave-in and are trapped under it. Jubilee sends an SOS and decides to tell the children a story as they wait for rescue. The story is about a land ruled by a handsome Prince Scott and his Princess Jean, where the greatest treasure, a McTaggart crystal, has been the source of all power and evil. It was split in half, and the evil sorcerer and metal master Magnus the Malevolent is after it. When Magnus's metal warriors attack the thief Gambit, he is helped by farmer couple and their son Longshot. However, a rebel elf Jubilee comes to their help as seismic activity continues to shake the cave. Jubilee continues her story about the ugly troll Logan further joined Jubilee and Gambit in their quest to find the crystal. Gambit takes Jubilee and Logan to the secret mountain where he has hidden the crystal that Magnus told him to steal. From this episode onwards, Chris Potter was replaced by Tony Daniels to voice Gambit. In the treacherous mountain they are attacked by Saber-tooth and the Metal Warriors. Jubilee stops the story and goes to check the cave. She notices that the cave will soon be flooded and takes the children away from the spot. Jubilee continues by showing how the heroes defeat Saber-tooth and enter the dungeons of Magnus's castle to retrieve the other half of the crystal. But now Magnus appears, threatening to kill Logan, forcing Jubilee to unite the crystals. Jubilee does so, but overlords Magnus's power and defeats him. By this time the X-Men rescue Jubilee and the kids from the cave-in. As the kids ask Jubilee to finish the story, she tells them that the prince and princess rewarded her by sending her to school. So she escaped and went on many adventures with Logan and Gambit. The Fifth Horseman. A group of mutants called Hounds runs after a village boy with mutant powers and fails to catch him. Somewhere nearby, Fabian Cortez speaks to a tribe that has followed Apocalypse from ancient times. However, when the Hounds leader Caliban returns to Fabian with news of their failure, Fabian threatens Caliban by taking his enhancements away and asks him to get a new vessel for Apocalypse. Caliban senses a new young vessel nearby, and the Hounds encounter Beast and Jubilee as they return from an archaeological research trip. However, when Jubilee is about to fall off a bridge, Caliban recognizes that the new vessel is his old friend Jubilee. Caliban saves her, and the others catch Beast. They are talking to Fabian, who reveals that Apocalypse has bestowed some powers on Fabian to keep Apocalypse returning to Earth. Fabian made the Hounds and found the temple to Apocalypse, which is like the Egyptian one, and the portal to help Apocalypse return from the void. The Hounds resemble two unrelated groups in the comic, but neither is associated with Apocalypse. Fabian further turns Beast into a monster and releases him, whilst ordering the Hounds to prepare Jubilee for the ritual. Caliban insists on choosing another vessel, but Fabian refuses. A beastly Beast returns to their jeep and looks at old photographs of the X-Men, as well as the one with Jubilee. He runs towards the castle to free Jubilee instinctively. Back at the temple, the celestial conjunction and the time of the crossings have come. Fabian begins the ritual, but Caliban rebels and fights Fabian for insulting him. As Caliban fights his fellow Hounds, Fabian turns him back into the poor Morlock. But before Apocalypse arrives, Beast breaks in and fights the Hounds. Caliban uses the distraction to help Jubilee free. As Beast destroys the temple and the whole place starts coming down, the Hounds escape. Beast attempts to kill Fabian, but he turns Beast back to normal. Everyone escapes the temple except for Fabian, who gets trapped and inadvertently becomes the vessel allowing Apocalypse to return. Old Soldiers. The story begins in Paris, where Wolverine stands in front of the grave of an old enemy. 3 old veterans seem to recognize him, but assume Logan is possibly a son of the man they knew. Logan keeps the truth hidden and remembers 1944 Paris during World War II when he worked for the rebels. Captain Sawyer gave Logan the task of saving a scientist called André Cocteau from the Château de Mort and told him there would be backup help, which he would like. Cocteau's daughter Justine further asked him to bring her father back safely. On his way, Logan witnesses Nazi soldiers harassing a young boy and apprehends them. In a very heroic way, Captain America enters the fight and helps Logan defeat the soldiers. Cap turns out to be the backup, and together they make way for the chateau. Logan hands Captain America metal claws that helps them climb a cliff. They bond over patriotic ideologies and take out guards with them. They enter the chateau and find the scientist, but he refuses to go with them. Logan knocks him out, and the duo seek to escape with Cocteau, but the Red Skull stops them in their way. Did you know that Marvel wanted Wolverine to be a toy spokesperson? However, Eric Lewald was dead against it. He did not want the show to be toy-friendly or based on toy sales, possibly why it lasted 5 seasons. Anyway, back to the story. Red Skull and the Nazi soldiers capture Logan and Captain America. They are taken to the torture room, but Logan escapes his restraints and frees the Cap. Unfortunately for them, they find out that Andre has betrayed them. Cap and Logan still fight Red Skull, who activates a robot called the Sleeper, and actually what Cocteau had been working on. Cap and Logan manage to destroy the robot and even take down the soldiers, but Red Skull escapes with Cocteau, and the heroes get on their jet. but Red Skull manages to drop them. Cap and Logan bid goodbye as Cap promises to get Red Skull, while Logan promises to get his revenge on Cocteau. In the present, he blames the dead Andre for begrudging him the chance. However, Justine appears and she is miraculously as young as Wolverine. She confesses her father was a double agent for the Allies, and intentionally betrayed so as not to betray his cover. In the end, Wolverine writes the word hero in Cocteau's headstone and takes Justine to a bistro.
Monster! No! He is different, true. Born with a...
Descent. This story takes us to the Victorian era, where people were suddenly going missing, and someone sinister is attacking them. While discussing the crime with an inspector, scientist Dr. James Xavier suspects Dr. Nathaniel Essex is responsible for these crimes. Well, Essex is Mr. Sinister, but this story tells us how he came to be. James remembers that he and Nathaniel were at odds regarding their view on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. While Nathaniel supported it, James didn't, and his reason is revealed to be more religious. Nathaniel's wife, Rebecca, is further shown as sick, and although James treated her, Nathaniel was not satisfied with it. He obtained blood from Rebecca to find a cure on his own. To further prove his point, Nathaniel obtained mutants from circuses and other places. He then invited Darwin, James, and others. However, Darwin assumed the mutant powers were just cheap parlour tricks and leaves. Nathaniel's obsession with curing all diseases and making humans gods further scared them. Rebecca Grey is further considered to be an ancestor of Jean Grey. Meanwhile, James and the inspector find similar dead bodies, which James believes are the results of Nathaniel's experiments. He reminisces on how Essex accomplished his goals and used them to meet his wife, Rebecca Grey. He also ingested the same concoction and turned blue, like the present Sinister. When James went to Essex's lab, he found that Essex was locking up mutants. As James tries to stop Sinister from conducting such experiments, the key to the cells falls off, and the mutants escape. However, common people thought of these people as monsters, and although James tries to make people understand, he fails. Nathaniel tries to flee with Rebecca, but she refuses him, and Essex's lab was burned to ashes. It is further shown that Essex had created Jack the Ripper to get his mutant body parts. James claims to have visited the world looking for Essex, but finally caught up with him. However, James finds out that Nathaniel has fled and left Darwin's book as a token. In the actual present, Charles keeps away the same book and looks worried. Hidden agendas. During a mining accident, Sam Guthrie reveals his mutant powers and saves his dad and other miners. He becomes famous, but Kirkland, a member of the US military, looks forward to recruiting Sam. As Sam refuses to leave his hometown, Kirkland calls his men to take a less subtle approach. This involves spreading misinformation and rumours against Sam, which turn the people of his small mining town against them. Meanwhile, Beast finds a news article on Sam, and Rogue decides to pay him a visit, in case he needs any help. Sam Guthrie is actually X-Men Cannonball, and his sister Paige is Husk. When Rogue meets Sam, she learns about Kirkland and passes the information to the X-Men. However, Rogue gets noticed by the military, and Kirkland wants her gone. Meanwhile, Beast is unable to find much more about the Peace Corps that Kirkland told Sam about. But as he finds an address with much electricity usage, Professor Xavier sends Gambit to investigate. However, it's a trap, and Gambit gets caught. He finds that Kirkland uses mutants as weapons, placing them under control. But before the Gambit can be operated on, Beast and Xavier save him. On the other hand, as Sam gets bullied by some misguided boys, he is unable to control his temper. This further convinces Sam to call Kirkland and accept his offer, but the angry townsfolk surround the Guthrie household. This agitates Mr. Guthrie, who sends the mob after the X-Men. Meanwhile, Kirkland takes Sam on his helicopter, but Sam manages to escape. Kirkland sends robots called Shock Troops to catch him. As the Shock Troops attack the mob as well as the mutants, the X-Men fight them. Sam joins in and the day is about to be saved, but Kirkland sends the mutant to be weaponized. The mutant falls unconscious, but Sam wrecks Kirkland's train as revenge, which turns Kirkland down against the X-Men. However, the Guthries decide to leave town anyway. Graduation Day. In the series finale, the story begins with Garac rage-baiting the people to pass the mutant containment bill. Charles Xavier debates against it, and Garac uses a device to reveal that Xavier is a mutant. The sound waves from the device hurt all mutants, and Garac is taken away, but Professor is fatally injured. However, this incident turns mutants into rebels, and Magneto is able to take advantage of it. On the other hand, the X-Men take Moira's help to keep Professor X alive. Although the X-Men use Morph to send a message to the rebels as Professor Xavier, it's not enough. As a result, the unlikely trio of Jean, Wolverine and Cyclops heads for Genosha to speak with Magnus. When Magneto shoots down the Blackbird, Jean uses her force fields to safely land. They make their way through the rebellious mutants in Genosha and enter Magnus's Cave of Solitude. However, Magneto attacks them, and his magnetism seems to amplify Jean's powers. This gives her an idea, and she seeks Magneto's help in saving Charles Xavier. The knowledge of Xavier's death changes Magneto's mind, and he agrees. Returning to the mansion, Magneto uses his powers to enable Xavier to send a message to Landra. Xavier wakes up just in time to bid goodbye to his X-Men and expires. A host of Marvel superheroes are supposed to cameo in this scene, but budget cuts limited it to the X-Men. Nevertheless, Lilandra arrives and revives Xavier, but claims she can only keep him alive in the Shi'ar Empire. The episode ends with Xavier leaving with Lilandra, and if you want to know more, watch X-Men 97, which begins from this point onwards. Now that was epic. We are not exaggerating. X-Men, the animated series, was one of the most popular cartoons, paving the way for more Marvel cartoons and series. We have loved the storytelling and the characterization that have now become part of the MCU. We will go out on a limb and say it's perhaps the best of Marvel's animated series that dared to deal with serious issues like racism, fascism, and emotional turmoil from a traumatized childhood. Although we have an issue with the sloppy animation and stories in the 5th season, it didn't lose its essence. Do let us know which one is your favourite storyline from the series and what you think needed more screen time. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more of this cartoon awesomeness.